would like to call the meeting to order. This is the Oregon City Commission, and today is Wednesday, October 21st. Good evening. I'm Alice Norris, the mayor.
Good evening, Daphne West, Commission President.
James Nacita, Commissioner.
Doug Neely, Commissioner.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started, I assume that the majority of you have come for the public hearing this evening, but we have a couple items before that. And one is that Oregon has been celebrating its 150th year this year, so in commemoration, we have a rare and unique moment from Oregon City's history called our sesquicentennial moment. Because Willamette Falls Hospital, our local hospital, has been in the news lately because it's now Providence Willamette Falls, that would be appropriate to talk a little bit about history of medicine in Oregon City way back there. The concept of using entire houses as doctor's offices or hospitals was popular in the 1880s. Two different houses in Gladstone operated under the name Oregon City Hospital. These were private homes with 4 to 8 rooms, owned and operated by nurses and doctors. The second Oregon City Hospital in Gladstone closed its doors sometime before 1910. Until its incorporation in 1893, Gladstone was considered part of Oregon City, hence Oregon City Hospitals. In April of 1911, 3 women, nurses recently arrived from the east, bought an old house on Dimmick Street in Oregon City. Without the support of any male citizens, the 3 women had the old house fitted out as the third Oregon City Hospital, the first actually in Oregon City. They advertised the health-giving qualities of the fresh air of the Heights. The Oregon City Woolen Mill donated a wagon load of quality, fine wool blankets. In the 6 months, the hospital had spread to both floors and was using tents on the lawn. And then I think this is the last unusual fact. When Dr. McLaughlin's land titles were restored to his family following his death, as you know, he wasn't treated very well, not being a U.S. citizen for much of his life. So when his land titles were restored to his family, a provision of the law required that any money made from the sale of his land be used for a medical college. What is today called the Oregon Health Sciences University, OHSU, was the beneficiary of that money since Oregon City University had gone defunct. So, interesting, huh? From Dr. McLaughlin to OHSU. That is your sesquicentennial moment for the day. Now it gives me a great deal of pleasure to administer the oath of office to Officer Tyson Conroy, who is here this evening with family and friends. And it always gives me a pleasure to swear in new police officers. So please come forward, and Chief, you will help do the administering. You did arrive. Sorry. You're the one. Okay, so we actually have 2, John Ellis and Tyson Conroy. So, do you want to say something first?
Sure.
We need to have a microphone now.
I can use that one.
Okay.
Okay, this is kind of a neat privilege for us to introduce these 2 guys here today. They are obviously 2 most recent hires. We were really fortunate when we went out and advertised for police officers last time to try to get some lateral or experienced police officers. And we went through a lot of candidates, and we decided to hire Tyson and Sean. Tyson is an Oregon City native, I believe, for most of his life. He's the son of Rocky and Kelly Conroy. He graduated from Oregon City High School in 2001 and has a bachelor's degree from Portland State University. He actually started his career with us as a reserve officer, and halfway through the Reserve Academy, he was hired by Gresham Police Department and decided to come back home, which I think is a very smart choice, and has been with us, and we're really, really pleased to have him with us. And Sean is here, and also his wife Karen and his son Isaac and Ian are in the back row there. Sean graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in 1994. He's the son of Milton and Vicki Ellis, and he started with Scappoose Police Department in 2006 prior to working with us. So very glad to have both these guys here with us.
Thank you, Chief. And to me, this is very symbolic. It means that we're adding officers to our police force. So do we have 36 sworn officers now? How many?
We are authorized 38. We have 37. We're going to hire hopefully one more within another month.
That's great. That's really good news for the citizens of Oregon City. So let's get on with it. Thank you. Want to hold that? You officers need to be sworn before you're able to actually do the work. So would you please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and say your name, do solemnly swear that I will uphold the law and support the Constitution of the United States
support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Oregon.
and the state of Oregon.
I will abide by
I will abide by
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics
and the Department's rules and regulations,
and the Department's rules and regulations,
while faithfully performing
while faithfully performing
my duties
my duties
as police officer
as police officer
for Oregon City, Oregon.
for Oregon City, Oregon.
Thank you, and may you have a long and successful tenure. Just a minute, we need a photo op. You guys got your pictures? You got them all? Okay, great. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the families coming. It's very important to have the support of families when you're a police officer, so thank you. Next, we move into the part of the agenda called citizen comment. This is the section of the agenda where citizens may speak to us on a non-agenda item for up to 3 minutes. And since there are so many of you here, the procedure that we use when you come to the microphone is just to say your name and the city in which you reside. If you've printed legibly, we already have your address. So that's all you need to do. I just have one card this evening under citizen comment, and that is John Anderson. So please come forward.
John Anderson, Oregon City, Oregon. And I have a comment about, I received a ticket, report on it, decided to appeal the ticket. I'm 100% disabled. I decided to go down to the courts of Clackamas County to see if they would defer or waive my filing fees. And I received the packet from them. And I came back up here today, and I was told by the cashier at the court system that we don't accept deferrals from Clackamas County. The only way you can get an appeal is to pay the $197 in cash. Otherwise, you will not be granted an appeal. For me, I find that awfully strange. I'm not quite sure why it's that way. When I went to the Clackamas County Courthouse, they didn't quite understand it themselves. The money is received by Oregon City, Oregon Courthouse here, and then is sent to Clackamas County. And I don't understand that. I would think that if it was an appeals process that was ran through the county, then it surely would be accepted here as being a logical thought and means to get people that were either disabled or out of work, displaced out of their jobs where they didn't have the money, to an appeals process. Instead, the way it's set up, if you can't afford it within the 30 days, you just don't get your appeal if you don't have the $197 in cash to give to the Oregon City court system. And I only found this out maybe about 6 or 7 hours ago. And I don't really think that's a logical approach to an appellate system where should be treated equal. Where one man might have $1 million, and he could pay it and have his appeal immediately, but if you didn't have the $197, you would never get your appeal, even though the county will waive the fee. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you. That's a very specific thing. May we refer that to staff to see if there's, or Mr. Geisman, did you want to, nothing we know about that.
The first concern is the commission's role. Under the charter, the commission has no authority to review the
Court.
actions of the
court.
court. You know, yeah, and there, you know, exactly what's happening. I'm not familiar with the specifics of those statutes, but there may be things that limit the city's ability or the counties, or direct the counties to do certain things. You know, ultimately, it's the court's authority, so there's some real limits on what we can do.
So his options are to check back with the court?
Essentially,
Okay. Thank you.
With this court?
Yes.
yes.
I checked twice today, and they both told me it would not matter.
You know,
Yeah.
And even the county didn't quite understand it, because it's their money.
Okay.
I think the issue is, this was a municipal citation. The first court that would go to would be the municipal court. Then, depending on what the decision is at court, it would be appealable to the county. I don't think you could start at the county and work back. The dollars, that's a different situation versus the court authority, and I think this would fall under the muni court judge unless she made some other type of decision. So I think that's the first action that needs to take place. So I'd go back to the court here and check through this court system.
I don't quite follow what you mean. You mean I should just come in here tomorrow morning to the court system and ask them if they're going to waive the fee?
I don't
The
know.
judge ordered me that I
that's-
could appeal, and she gave me this piece of paper, and it says here that I have a non-refundable
Yeah.
fee.
Bring it in tomorrow, we can look at it and try to sort through that. Without looking through that, I'm not familiar with the specifics of this, but this is in the purview of Judge McNeese, and we're going to have to look at it from muni court side.
Okay. Because it makes much sense to change the situation here for the people that can't actually afford it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further comment cards, so we'll move on the agenda. As we look through it, item 7B is being held over to the next meeting. That would be the bylaws for the Transportation Advisory Committee. If there isn't a consent agenda, are there any others that need to be reordered this evening for any reason? Hearing no. Yes.
Oh, no, the public hearing is coming up first. I was just checking.
Yes. So we'll continue with the agenda in
Okay.
the order in which it is
Yeah, sorry.
listed. So the first item on the agenda is the public hearing, and this is the McLaughlin Neighborhood Appeal, along with a City Commission call-up hearing for the Planning Commission's August 13th approval with conditions of the Public Works Concept Master Plan. And this is a quasi-judicial hearing where the City Commission sits as essentially a judicial body governed by the rules of the State of Oregon and the city codes and charter. So because this is a little bit different animal, we're going to spend some time here talking about our both bias and what's the other one?
Process.
But process and conflict of interest. But I will turn to our attorneys so that we all are clear about what the rules are that govern today's hearing. Mr.
Okay.
Geisman.
Thank you, Mayor Norris. And let me start out by the typical quasi-judicial warnings that statute requires us to read, and then we'll go into some of the interesting features of tonight's hearing. As the mayor indicated, this is a quasi-judicial hearing. The criteria are listed in the staff report and the materials provided to the commission. If anybody wants them read out, I can do that. Testimony, arguments, and evidence should be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the city's land use plan or regulations that you believe applied to the decision. And failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to the board based on that issue. And in addition, the failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the commission to respond precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Given the applicant, I'm not certain that's much of a concern, but I do, before turning to that leads a good segue into the three concerns we've talked about before, the bias, conflict of interest, and ex parte contacts. I'll start with ex parte because that's going to be the easiest. Does anybody have any ex parte conflicts to declare? Any challenges from the audience for ex parte? Seeing,
I just want to make one comment on ex parte. I have had, I think, 2 conversations specifically with Mr. Gifford relating to the procedure of appeals in general, but those discussions, to my recollection, did not include a discussion of any particular site, including this particular site.
okay. Anybody desire more information or wish to make a challenge to the commissioner? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next 2, and I'll kind of push them together, the bias and conflict of interest, because that is an issue that has come up. Well, actually, as you know, the applicant in this case is the city, and you serve as a city commission. The first issue is bias, and what you need to ask yourself as far as bias is, will you be able to make the decision based on the evidence in the record, as well as the criteria in the city's code, and not based on any other factor, and can you fairly apply the code, those criteria to the facts tonight? And if you can answer that question, yes, then the fact that you represent the city, that you are elected representative of the cities, who is the applicant, doesn't preclude you from sitting. There have been a couple cases at LUBA that talk about these issues, and essentially there is no other body, and there is no bias issue with the city sitting in judgment on an application by the city. Any questions about the bias issue or any declarations of bias?
No? Commissioner West?
Well, I am a resident of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, but I feel I can make this decision in a fair way.
Any challenges to the commission on the basis of bias?
Well, I then declare myself a member of that neighborhood, too.
Do you believe it will affect your decision?
Same goes for me, but I thought that was going to come into conflict of interest as opposed to bias.
It probably fits more into conflict of interest, and let me finish doing the bias and see if any challenges to any of the commissioners' bias. And the reason why we leave that in bias is because it's about whether or not you have outside influences that are going to affect your decision-making. Under Oregon law, the conflict of interest is far more limited. It's a matter of whether you or a member of your family will have a direct there are two issues. Actual conflict of interest is if you or a member of your family will have a direct pecuniary benefit or detriment as a result of this decision. There's also potential conflict of interest. Potential conflict is if you may have a direct pecuniary benefit or detriment as a result of this decision. If you have an actual conflict of interest, you're not allowed to participate. If you have a potential, you may declare it and participate. So with that, does anybody have any conflict of interest, any direct pecuniary benefits that you'd wish to declare?
None.
Any challenges from the audience? Seeing none, it doesn't appear that there are any bias, conflict of interest issues. I do want to raise one thing that you may hear later on tonight, and this gets to part of the criteria. One of the issues that was raised was the city attorney's role of representing the city as counsel to the city as well as counsel to the applicant. And again, that's been reviewed through the Oregon Ethics Commission as well as Oregon State Bar Rules, and that's covered in, let's see, I believe it's page 3 of the staff report that you got. Essentially, the Board of Governors explained that there's no multiple client conflict of interest when there's only one client. And so the advice that we've received, and which is consistent with our understanding of LUBA cases, is that there is no issue with this. So unless you have concerns about that, we'll keep moving forward, and that may be something you hear more about this evening.
I have one question for you.
Commissioner Nocita?
Mr. Kavaisman, is the staff memo, the section 1 on legal representation, was that drafted by the city attorney, or was it drafted by the planning staff?
That portion was drafted by the city attorney.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, so with that, I think I'll move on to the process. This is a little bit unusual for that. We have two things going on that we're pushing together into one hearing. The first is an appeal by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association of the Planning Commission decision. The second is the City Commission's call-up of the Planning Commission's decision. The appeal is fairly straightforward, and our code deals with that pretty directly. When there is an appeal of the Planning Commission decision, the decision is on the record developed for the Planning Commission. That means no new evidence, only arguments about issues. The issues are limited to the issues in the notice of appeal, and only those persons who testified before the Planning Commission are authorized to address the City Commission. And that's pretty straightforward code. The call-up is a little bit different. We don't actually have any provisions in the code regarding that. So there's a statute that specifically authorizes City Commission call-up. There's also an argument that there's some inherent authority, but with the statute, we don't have to get into that. So the City Commission call-up, there was no limitation from the City Commission on the issues that they wanted to hear. Essentially, it was bring the decision forward. So in looking at how to make that work with the appeal, the staff recommendation was to allow any issue, to not limit the issues to those that are on the notice of appeal, to allow any issue to be addressed. However, we also recommended that the City Commission continue to limit the evidence to that which was developed before the Planning Commission. The thought was that you have delegated the authority to sort of be the evidentiary body of the Planning Commission and let only the issues rise up to the City Commission. Similarly, the thought was also to limit it to the people who had appeared before the Planning Commission, a similar prudential decision that the City Commission has put into the code. I can say that it's not clear how LUBA would deal with that, whether the City Commission would call up. There's not much discussion of that in the statute as well. So there may be some discretion for the City Commission in terms of allowing new evidence in or allowing additional persons to speak. However, I would caution that if, in fact, the Commission were to allow new evidence to come into the record, there would have to be provided an opportunity for people to comment on that new evidence, for rebuttal to come up, and the statute allows for a period for the applicant to submit final written argument. So to the extent the Commission wants to hear new evidence, it would delay any decision on this for at least a month.
So I think the thing that we need to talk about then is first of all, it appears that we're safe allowing, or we're legally secure, allowing additional people to speak who did not otherwise speak at the Planning Commission. But secondly, it will be our discretion whether we wish to whether we wish to hear new evidence, such as a new study that someone has bringing forward, or photographs, for instance, knowing that it would be at least a 1 month delay. So, Commissioner Nocita.
Okay. I have some points on both of those. One is, I'm glad we're going through this because I think there's a lot of value in the City Commission call-up on city-owned property. And I think this may be my first land use appeal sitting on City Commission, at least certainly one of this magnitude and significance. And I think we're going through our getting used to this process and confronting the issues that are new and confronting an appeal and a call-up like this. We did do some discussions. We did have some discussion regarding new evidence, and I think my recollection was that we decided if we needed new evidence, we would accept it
I don't think we've
If-
discussed it on this. This is the time to do it.
This is the time.
Just give your opinion about tonight.
No, I don't have any problem. My view on the city commission call-up is that it's much broader as elected representatives, that we should exercise our flexibility to the maximum extent possible, both in giving our citizens the opportunity to speak and for us as decision makers, getting the information we need to make a decision. So I don't have a problem either with the broad factual submittal aspect of this and the broad standing issue. I would accept anybody who wanted to make a comment, even if they had not spoken before the Planning Commission. If that leads to a rebuttal process that was going to require another month, I have an issue that leads to that point anyway. And again, this is part of this being a new process. I think in front of Mr. Patterson is probably the record in this case. Okay. We received an email on October 16th with, hyperlinks to various portions of the record being 1,600 pages long. I will be the first to confess that since October 16th, I have not reviewed 1,600 pages. I don't know that in making a decision on this, I'm going to review 1,600 pages. However,
Redundant.
I don't think that even had the record been 100 pages, I think the record was transmitted to us with insufficient time to review it. And I want to say up front that I don't feel that it is appropriate for us to make any decision tonight. I don't know if the time to raise this is now or after the public hearing, but I am certain to want a continuance on this because of that issue of the record, the significance of the issue, and the fact for me personally as a commissioner to make a judicious decision on this matter. It's not going to happen for me tonight. I will either abstain or vote adversely to upholding the decision of the Planning Commission. I don't feel that this process has given the Commission adequate time to review the record, and it's not it's not a criticism of staff or anything. It's part of this learning curve that I think we're all on with these commission call-ups. I guess I do have a question for the city attorney, though, on this point. Does the city code say anything specific about timing of the record and how much time the city commission has as either a statutory matter or as a code matter, how much time the commission needs to have the record provided to it prior to a hearing like this?
I don't believe there is anything in city code or in the statute. Typically, the city is operating under the 120-day rule, which does require usually fairly prompt turnaround. And I believe it's staff's attempt to keep these things moving and not get bogged down. So I think this was treated as almost any other appeal gets set. The attempt is to get it in front of the commission as soon as possible so that we don't have 120-day issues, so that the process continues to move.
Okay, that probably raises another question then. Have we clocked the 120-day? I mean, how significant is that when we're the applicant is this, a department of the city anyway? How significant is the 120-day clock?
It's the 120-day clock continues to apply, but what happens when there's a violation of the 120-day rule is that the applicant has the ability to take the decision maker to mandamus, to sue them in court. I don't think a circuit court would look very favorable on the city suing itself. So, as a I think it can be waived as a practical matter. It's I think the process as far as timing was really done like any other appeal.
It's a non-issue. The Public Works Director has already waived the 120-day rule.
Okay. So then my question on timing is, so we have no time limits unless there are any we set ourselves.
I believe we have to issue a decision within 1 year,
A decision within 1 year, okay.
which this application was submitted in February.
Yeah, there is a statute that hasn't really been tested that says 120-day can be extended for a total of 245 days. In other words, you get 365 days. What happens when you go past that? Does the application become void? Is that waivable? No one's tested it yet, but that's a conceivable issue.
Okay, and then, if new evidence is brought before us this evening, we have an opportunity then, what's the timing on the rebuttal? We just leave it open for 30 days for rebuttal, and then we will have a chance to review that new record, so at our next meeting, it could be an oral review? Or
Typically,
written?
what happens, the statute requires that if, that people have an opportunity to rebut the new evidence that comes in. The statute sets up a process called the 777 process, where people get 7 days to submit new evidence, 7 days for rebuttal evidence, and 7 days for the applicants to submit final argument. The commission could change those numbers as long as it doesn't go below that floor. So, the 777 works out because it gets you 21 days. Staff can then get that record to you relatively quickly, so.
Okay, Commissioner Neely.
I do have a request. I have no objection to what you're suggesting, and I did not view that we were going to make a decision tonight in any case. The request is this. We do have an appeal that we actually hear people that are on the record dealing with the appeal specifically, and then we start, if we want to get new evidence, we do it at that point, but just to deal with it in an organized fashion.
I can ask.
When we reopen, assuming that we continue it, we can reopen the public hearing and then have, if we wish, anybody to speak, whether it was on the appeal or not. But just to keep things organized, and given what we've seen, my preference would be to take it in that particular order.
I was planning on doing it that way. Commissioner West?
So if we take new evidence tonight, then they have, whoever has an opportunity to rebut it, et cetera, it's not going back to the planning commission. So basically, that the planning commission step is usurped, and it becomes between us. Oops. Sorry. So it becomes.
Yeah. So, as I understand it, your question is, if in fact you allow new evidence and set that process, does it go back to the planning commission? That's an option we I haven't discussed with you, but that's certainly an option you could take. You could send it back, remand it to the planning commission for the planning commission to hold a new hearing on the matter. Alternatively, you could do the process, but the process that I laid out of the 777 would the planning commission would not have a role in that.
Okay. So, let's make sure that we're clear about the parameters of tonight's discussion. Commissioner Nocita.
Just one further question, Madam Mayor. Mr. Gebeisman, on the issue of broadening the standing to anybody, whether or not they testified before the Planning Commission, would that require something formal from us, such as a motion?
No, we just agree, don't we?
I don't believe it requires a motion. It's more a procedural matter that that you can decide on.
Okay.
Is there anyone then that wishes to restrict those who speak before us to those who spoke before the Planning Commission?
Other than the order.
Yep. Okay, I see none. So the speaking this evening can include those, anyone who is prepared to come to address us.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask one more question. So anybody can speak as far as evidence at this point, if I understood what Commissioner Neely was saying, and I didn't hear much, that at this point we are keeping the evidence limited to what's in the record before the Planning Commission, that at some point this evening you may decide to expand that.
That's right.
But for now, it's limited to the Planning
It's
Commission.
mostly an organizational thing. What we have here is this record.
Yeah, no, I believe it's not limited to anything, but that we'll take testimony at a specific time that might be new. That's my
A
understanding.
specific time after we've heard
Right.
this
Yeah,
appeal.
but
Yes.
that we plan to hear
Yes.
even additional evidence. Actually, I'd like to ask, is there anyone who's come tonight to present additional evidence that was not presented before the Planning Commission? We have some, okay?
You do?
She just raised her
I
hand.
have two written testimonies that I found on my desk.
See, wait a second here. we'll check and see. Commissioner West, why don't you ask your question while Tony's looking?
So we are going to start with the, reviewing the appeal, or we're going to start with the commission call-up?
We're actually merging them together. The only thing that we're separating is we'll take anyone that's come with new evidence that wasn't presented to the Planning Commission after we take the general public hearing, those who did present to the Planning Commission.
But as far as the issues, people can address either the McLaughlin neighborhood issues or any other issue that because of the call-up. So those are being sort of merged, the issues.
But, okay, we're merging the issues, but we cannot merge them with the, with the appeal.
No,
The appeal is limited to what was there. The call-up,
no, we're
something
merging.
different. We're merging.
We're merging them. So rather than separating out the call-up from the appeal,
The problem with separating the call-out from the appeal is you might have somebody come up, address the appeal, and come up later, and it's just easier,
Okay,
I
got
think.
it.
Yeah.
the issues aren't necessarily different unless we make them different, I guess. So, Commissioner Neely,
Well, no, I guess I'll let you go on. Are we done with the procedure piece?
we are.
If
Mr.
the commission's comfortable with
give it to
your
Susan.
understanding of the procedure, which, let me try and restate it again. What will happen is that the issues are open, not limited to the appeal. It's on anything. Anybody can appeal. Anybody can address the commission. It's not limited to those who appear before the Planning Commission. But at this point, no new evidence is allowed in. Is that
Until we finish the...
until you hear and the commission?
In Section 1, yes. Okay, I would like to also address another, if you're finished, are there any other questions? I'd like to address another thing. Many of you are from the same area, and I just want you to know that we sit tonight in a different role as a city commission, essentially as if we are in a courtroom, and so applause or clapping or showing or booing is not allowed. That essentially, you want to make sure that we are an unbiased body to make the best decision. So we'll ask you to refrain from that this evening. With that,
I got a point of clarification.
Commissioner Neely.
When I've seen appeals before, I don't think we've had something that was called a concept plan. And is there a distinction between what we're calling a concept plan and what normally comes to us in appeals in terms of some other aspect? I've never seen something. I mean, they've usually been a request coming in from a developer in which some specific things have been forwarded, but they've never called it a concept plan. And I'm wondering what the distinction is there.
Sure. So usually you'll see an appeal of a subdivision or a site plan
Zoning.
design review. So in our code, we have a master plan section, and we have what are called concept master plans, which are the large infrastructure, addressing large infrastructure impacts, phasing of the site and whatnot. So this was added to the code recently. So this would be the first appeal you're seeing of this, of a concept master plan, is what our code identifies it as.
And a process later on, though, is when you actually go beyond that, would there be other things that would be potentially coming before the Planning Commission on this particular project?
So if the concept, in this case, the concept master plan lays out 4 phases with certain development and infrastructure improvements in each phase. If the applicant in phase 1 is in compliance with phase 1 of the concept plan, they go through what's called a detailed development plan submittal, which is like a site plan design review. And it's reviewed as a type 2 decision, which is a staff decision. We have thresholds in the master plan code that set up, let's say you increase the footprint of the building by more than 10%. That would mean you'd have to go back to the Planning Commission, amend your concept plan in order to do that detailed development plan. In that case, the detailed development plan would be in front of the Planning Commission. But if they're in compliance with the approved concept master plan, those later phases come in and are reviewed by staff, which on appeal would come to the City Commission.
The type 2s also are part of a public hearing.
Oh, yes.
Did you notice it?
Yes.
So each of those phases would have an opportunity for public input.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Along the way.
Commissioner Neely, I do want to point out that there was, in fact, one concept plan appeal that we were able to remember, and that was the Cove development. It was withdrawn before any hearing was ever held on it. So you're correct that the Planning Commission the City Commission has never heard one, but there was an appeal.
Well, my ability for recall is getting more and more limited as time goes on, but
No one's recalling you. It's a sensitive word. Okay, with that, then, if we all understand the game rules, then the public testimony will go like this. First, we'll ask the applicant to provide us testimony in 10 minutes or less. Then we'll, what?
Would you like me to go staff report, then applicant?
Staff report applicant. Are you separate?
I am the community development, I'm planning.
You are planning, you are not the applicant.
I am not the applicant.
Who is the applicant this evening?
Public Works.
You are the applicant, thank you. I didn't understand that, okay. So, staff report first, 10 minutes or less. Then we'll open the public hearing, and the applicant will have an opportunity to present their case in 10 minutes or less.
All right, Tony.
And then the appellant, who is the spokesperson for the appellant? William Gifford. Then we'll have an opportunity to present the appellant case in 10 minutes or less. Then the citizen comments will occur. You have an opportunity to speak to us for 3 minutes, unless you're a representative of a neighborhood association or another organization which you have 5 minutes. And then at the end, the applicant will have an opportunity to, both the applicant and the appellant will have an opportunity to sum up. Yes, Mr. Gifford? Procedural question?
Procedural question.
Yes.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Procedural question is that although I said I would be the spokesperson for the appellant, I wasn't planning on making the opening statements, and we have a suggested list as to how we would like our testimony to be heard, and that I would be providing concluding remarks rather than taking up my time at the end.
I think
stack that's been provided to you.
right.
We have an
yeah,
attorney that would
we've
like to
just
make some opening remarks.
Yeah, we've just ordered that here.
Thank you very much.
I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other procedural things? Mr. Kobasman?
The applicant has indicated that they would like, that they had thought they had 15 minutes and would like a little additional time for their presentation.
And that was based on, that's what we use at the Planning Commission, is 15 minutes for the applicant's presentation, and that was what staff had advised the applicant of what they would probably, sort of City Commission. Obviously, it's your discretion as to how you would like to run
I
your
would
hearing.
like to say under 15 minutes, closer to 10, if at all possible.
I'd like to...
But I still, no, it's important to have a complete report, so that's...
And I think we have to understand the phases that are being presented as well, and if there are 4 of them, probably needs at least 5 minutes per phase.
No, we don't want to limit, but it's certainly our understanding that often we can say things in fewer words than is necessary. But
Madam Mayor?
Commissioner
I just want to
Nocita.
double-check with the city attorney if our code speaks to that.
No, it's not our code, it's
doesn't.
procedural that we've set. So- And at our discretion, we can change that. So, are we ready to proceed?
I believe so.
Tony, Mr. Conkle, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. I'll be presenting the Public Works Concept Master Plan appeal, which was brought by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. The Concept Master Plan builds on the Operations Facility Plan that was approved by the City Commission in December of 2005. So in addition, tonight, the staff memorandum that you received dated October 14th, 2009 addresses the 16 appeal items raised by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. As you're well aware, this Planning Commission decision was called up by this body. There weren't any issues identified, so we didn't prepare anything, obviously, and we were here to answer any questions that you may have as we go through this process. So feel free to interrupt me if you wish, or wait till the end and you can question me at that point. The property is located at South Center Street and South John Adams. It's approximately 5 acres. The applicant has submitted a concept development plan for 4 phases of development on the site. I'll let the applicant go into detail on those phases. It is in the memorandum that I provided you, as well as the application. The PC did review this application. It was a public hearing. They took public testimony, written testimony, considered all the evidence, and weighed that evidence against the approval criteria. They adopted the staff report in their findings and the conditions of approval, and they added additional conditions of approval, and they voted unanimously to in support of this application, approving it. Notice of decision was mailed out on August 13th, 2009. As I stated earlier, the applicant raised 16 issues. Mr. Gebeisman has addressed the first issue concerning legal representation. And I guess I'll go back. This is the concept master plan, which the applicant will be coming back to and walking through each of those 4 phases on that site. What it does call for is additional parking improvements along the 2 properties owned on South Center Street, new parking on South Center Street to serve the new office building. The applicant did seek 5 adjustments to the Oregon City Municipal Code. Through the concept development plan process, you can request adjustments to any code criteria. So, for example, there is a height limit restriction. You can request an adjustment to that. There are approval criteria. The staff report addressed those criteria, and the Planning Commission did review those. Up on top, this is the upper site. You have a cliff separating South Center Street from what we call the upper site. You also have a parcel included in the concept master plan that is currently owned by it's the Armory building, owned by the military. Through a concept plan, you are allowed to include properties that are not under your current ownership. They're non-binding, but if they do become under ownership, they will be included in that master plan. Access to the site is obviously off Center Street for the lower site. There's an access road along South Center Street that continues to the upper yard, and then also access off of South John Adams. As I stated earlier, Mr. Gebeisman's addressed the legal representation issue raised by the appellant. The second issue raised was the site selection. The appellant indicates that there was not adequate review of alternative sites and no acquisition costs included. There's not an approval criteria in the land use code that addresses site selection, the requirement to do an alternatives analysis, to provide one, or to provide cost estimates. Planning Commission heard this testimony, was unable to identify a criteria, and as such did not address this comment submitted during the public hearing. Second issue is concerning a Waterboard Park and adjusting the park boundary directly to the south of the upper yard is Waterboard Park, a charter park that was created. The Planning Commission approved several conditions of approval concerning a new pedestrian pathway connecting to the existing pathway in Waterboard Park, additional signage for Waterboard Park for parking. Looking at the charter, it specifically says that park trails within charter parks is allowed, does not need to go to a vote of the people. Another issue is concerning the boundary description in the charter. This description was read into the record to the Planning Commission. It is extremely vague. It references a road, a private road that does not exist anymore. It does not reference any meets and bounds, any legal description, any right-of-way line as the boundary of Waterboard Park. The appellants raised this issue in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission dealt with this by attaching a condition of approval directing the applicant to review the charter, again, the description of that property boundary, and to re-verify the location of that property to ensure it is in compliance with what the charter says.
I'll pose a question at this point.
Commissioner Neely?
It's still designated on some plotting somewhere that as city property, is that correct? I mean, Waterboard Park it must be identified as a city property somewhere.
Yes.
Well, no, he said the boundaries aren't that clearly specified. So, but the boundaries of the city property that we're calling Waterboard Park must be identified as separate from private ownership, I presume.
Not that we're finding yet. Not that we found. We found the property description in the charter. We've not been able to find any recorded document with meets and bounds of the exact location of that property line.
Ooh, my backyard is on Waterboard Park. Does that mean I own more property?
You probably have a legal description of your property.
I imagine surrounding
continue.
properties have legal descriptions of their
Yeah,
properties, too.
which is how you'll work, how essentially you work it out under review, I'm sure. Okay, please continue.
The fourth issue raised is concerning the traffic study, and we have Mr. Replinger here tonight. He represents the city and does our transportation analysis of transportation impact analysis that have been submitted to the city, and I'll call Mr. Replinger up to go over the results of that traffic study. The appellant indicates that there are inadequate roads to serve the site. The impact of additional trips was not addressed, and that the appellant submitted photos demonstrating that vehicle movements to and from the site cannot be safely made, and those were rebutted by the applicant, who did submit photos showing that those movements could be made. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Replinger to address the transportation impact analysis that was submitted.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. John Replinger, a resident in Portland. I have been performing traffic impact analysis review for the city for many, many years. I've done probably a couple hundred, including some concept master plans. And I typically review these, provide the input to the planning staff. My materials relating to the review of the traffic study were included in all of the materials submitted and considered by the Planning Commission and the appeals. I found that the traffic study submitted by the applicant met all of the guidelines, that they proved compliance with the code requirements relating to the concept master plan. I found no flaws in the assumptions, the methodology, or the techniques. The applicant addressed all of the criteria as specified and as applied by the city planning staff for a traffic study. The applicant offered some mitigation measures, and I'm not even certain that those measures would have been necessary to find in compliance with the city requirements of the OCMC.
Thank you.
Continuing on, the next issue raised by the appellant concerns the noise study. The applicant did submit a noise study for the potential uses on the site. Oregon City Municipal Code does not have a noise standard at the property line. The study was performed using the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality standards and identified one location out of 5 that would exceed the standard as set up by the Department of Environmental Quality. The applicant has proposed mitigation measures to address this one site that have been adopted by the Planning Commission as a condition of approval as part of the application. Next issue raised by the appellant concerns air quality, indicating that the Planning Commission completely ignored a diesel fume and particulate impact study that was submitted into the record. The PC considered this evidence. It's also important to note that the study is off engines built prior to the mid-1990s. The 2000 regulations, as identified by the study, will result in a 90% reduction in particulates from diesel engines. And the applicant has submitted evidence in the record indicating that 70% of the city fleet was manufactured after the year 2000, that all our equipment does comply with state and federal requirements for air quality standards. The Planning Commission did consider this testimony, and it did look at this, and it felt that the applicant had submitted and addressed the issues raised about air quality in this area. Next question, or the next issue raised by the appellant, deals with the lead condition of approval that was applied by the Planning Commission. The appellant indicates that the entire project should be LEED certified rather than just the office building on the lower site. Once again, there's not an approval criteria that requires LEED for any building within Oregon City. It's certainly standards and goals that the city may have, but in terms of a land use approval criteria, it does not exist. The Planning Commission considered this. They discussed making the whole project LEED certified. They discussed that the upper site is going to be utilized as a yard, storage facilities, maintenance facilities, that the buildings are utilitarian in nature, and they felt it was more appropriate that the LEED certification be required on the building on the bottom. Certainly the City Commission can can consider what the Planning Commission decided and address that. The next issue raised by the appellant is the deconstruction condition of approval. They felt that a condition of approval 9 was inadequate because it only addressed the outbuildings. On the upper site, there are several outbuildings located. This application was brought before the Historic Review Board for their comments. They did submit comments into the record. They recommended several conditions of approval. Each one of those conditions of approval were implemented by the Planning Commission verbatim as requested by the Historic Review Board. Historic Review Board identified the importance of the deconstruction documentation, if possible, relocation of the 3 historic outbuildings on the upper site. The applicant has agreed to this. Conditions of approval have been placed. The Planning Commission did not require, nor did HRB require, that every building on the site, including those on the lower site, be deconstructed in the same manner. So the Planning Commission, working off of cooperation with the comments from the Historic Review Board, felt that they've implemented a condition of approval that's appropriate for the historic buildings located on the site. The next issue raised by the appellant is the historic building replacement. The appellant indicates that Historic Review Board approval should be required for the entire site, since the entire site's within the overlay district. Once again, the applicant went to Historic Review Board, presented the application, they submitted their comments. The applicant has not proposed any development at this time. This is not a permit to develop one thing on the site. They would need to come back in for an additional permit through that detailed development plan, which is specific to implement each phase of development. Once again, this goes back to, as part of this concept development plan process, the applicant is able to request amendments to code criteria. The applicant went to the Historic Review Board, and as part of their application, requested an amendment that the buildings that are going to be constructed on the upper site, the parking lots, the outbuildings on the upper site, be exempt from going through Historic Review Board for their design. Historic Review Board submitted comments indicating they understand that the use proposed on the upper site, that it was reasonable to exempt those buildings and the parking lot from Historic Review Board, provided the following measures were taken, which included additional landscaping and making sure that the fencing up there is appropriate for the site, really focusing on the outer edge of the site and letting the interior work and function as a public works maintenance yard. Historic Review Board and the Planning Commission both agreed that all the buildings and parking lots on the lower site would need to go through HRB approval, Historic Review Board approval, at time of detailed development plan, and that condition is included in this decision. The next issue raised by the appellant concerns archaeological evidence. Evidence has been submitted into the record concerning a potential pioneer building foundation, which was ignored by the Planning Commission, according to the appellant. The Oregon City Municipal Code Comprehensive Plan, we do not identify any historical resources on the site. The applicant did have a historic resource inventory of the site performed. It's not identified as a resource to be protected.
Was the...
Commissioner Neely?
Was it identified as to what the person that was raising the issue? I mean, was there something there that specifically cited?
Yes.
But it was not deemed historically important by the Historic Review Board?
It was submitted late into the record before the Planning Commission. It did not go in front of the Historic Review Board as to the foundation. Next issue raised is concerning, there was evidence submitted into the record concerning the potential negative impact on surrounding property values. Once again, we go back to the municipal code. Under a land use application, there is no requirement to address property values, nor is it an approval or denial criteria that's found in the Oregon City Municipal Code. The next issue concerns citizen involvement. The applicant indicates that the citizens were not included in the design of the site. I think I'm going to put this in two different, in two phases. The first phase is what the code requires for a land use application. And that requires that an applicant meets with the neighborhood association to present the application to them prior to the city reviewer deeming the application complete, which the applicant did do. The larger issue is obviously being a public agency, public outreach and whatnot. In my opinion, they went far above and beyond the requirements of the municipal code, but I will leave that up to the applicant to describe their public involvement process, responding to questions, meetings, et cetera, that they did. Once again, the approval criteria is a requirement to meet with the neighborhood association and present the application. That's what the code says, and that's what I work off of, is my requirements by the code, and that's what the Planning Commission did as well. The next issue is the inherent bias. The appellant indicates that all city departments and the Planning Commission is biased and will have a difficult time being objective when reviewing an application. At the beginning of the public hearing process, the Planning Commission went through the exact same process you did tonight concerning bias, ex parte, and conflict of interest. The Planning Commission indicated that some of the members live in the neighborhood, are members of the neighborhood association. One member is within a couple houses of the site. They've indicated that this has been discussed before at neighborhood meetings. They indicated that they have no bias, they have no conflict of interest, and that they could hear this application fairly. No one questioned them or brought up any issues. And once again, staff prepared a staff report in response to the criteria in the Oregon City Municipal Code. That staff report was brought out at a public hearing. Testimony was taken. The Planning Commission considered all the evidence in the record, as well as the staff report, against those approval criteria. And they issued their decision based on those approval criteria. So I guess we would leave it up to you to consider if our Planning Commission is biased. The next issue raised is the inadequate financial analysis. Once again, we go back to, as part of a land use application, there's no approval criteria requiring a financial analysis for this project. Next issue is insufficient specificity of conditions 7, 17, 18, 19, 21, 27, and others. The appellant did not identify the others, and indicating that these conditions are not specific enough. The Planning Commission reviewed the conditions of approval. They added their own conditions of approval. They felt that they were adequate and specific enough to make a finding that the criteria had been met. The next issue was not actually addressed by the appellant. It was a statement in the first paragraph of the appeal that the adjustment approval criteria had not been met. In the staff report presented to the Planning Commission, each one of the adjustments is identified, and each of the approval criteria for an adjustment is addressed against each of those adjustments that was requested. The appellant fails to raise or identify how the Planning Commission has failed to apply the criteria for an adjustment in this situation. That concludes my presentation. The City Commission should review the decision of the Planning Commission in light of the issues raised by the appellant. If the City Commission finds that the Planning Commission adequately addressed and interpreted the criteria for a concept master plan appropriately, they should deny the appeal and approve and affirm the Planning Commission's decision approving the concept master plan. If the City Commission finds that the Planning Commission erred, they should consider if a condition of approval could be applied to meet the criteria which is not being met, in which case you should apply that condition of approval, deny the appeal, and approve the concept master plan. If you find that the Planning Commission erred and no condition of approval can be applied and a criteria is not being met, the City Commission should approve the appeal and deny the concept master plan. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions you have now, or do you prefer to open the public hearing? All right. I will open the public hearing, and the applicant may proceed to the microphone.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. We are here tonight, Oregon City Public Works Department, to present our master plan, and I brought several of our project team members with, who will also be making brief presentations. There's so much information to cover, but we'll do our best. I'm Nancy Kraustar, as you know. We have John Lewis here to present. We have Ben Schonberger, who is a contract planner from Winterbrook Planning, and David Hyman, who's been working on this project since 2004 as a project architect and helping with the master planning process. We started master planning this process in 2004, as I just mentioned, 6 years ago. It was essentially just to strategically plan how public works facilities can effectively function to assure continued reliable service to Oregon City customers. The department realized that a public works operations center and then department center commanded a very deliberate planning process, which we have been embarked on for many years. I might mention that I put at your place the memo that was submitted by the applicant in response to the appellant, and I thought just to kind of make the communication a little easier, if you wanted to follow along at all, it would be at your place. The computer thing's a little difficult to follow, but we'll do our best. This is all a learning experience for us. Let's see, that's not what I want. Okay, can you put it on our PowerPoint, please? No. Technical difficulties. Well, I can continue speaking. The process for this plan started in 2004, in which a 2005 facilities plan was completed at the department level and then brought to the City Commission for your review and acknowledgement. This was to make sure the City Commission was aware of the initial plan and to allow for subsequent step-by-step actions, activities to prepare for plan implementation, such as purchasing the Cameron building, a property at First Street, and also preparing this land use application itself. Okay, here we go. Oh. Okay. Okay, great, super. Okay, so both the facilities plan and then the actual master plan that turned out to be our land use application were reviewed needs. They assessed all the needs of public works for the next 20 years. They included a site search and analysis. They included the historic building inventory, which was quite comprehensive by Penyard. And it resulted in a concept site design and cost estimates for the facilities. The cost estimates were updated in 2009 so we could prepare strategic funding proposals for the City Commission. This was the public meetings that have been held to date. We started with McLaughlin Neighborhood, held 3 meetings with them. In between meetings, we prepared responses via memo. And then we also went to the Historic Review Board because we knew we needed to get clearance from that board. We started with the Planning Commission, had 5 meetings with the Planning Commission through their final decision in August. And then, as you may recall, last December 9th, we brought it to the City Commission during a work session to provide an update for you so you're aware of where we were moving with the plan. And here we are today. All along, the master plan goals have been to prepare for this land use process. And as we mentioned, we chose the concept master plan because it is a 20-year plan, and we are proposing it to be constructed in phases. We wanted to make sure we met both current and future needs of the Consolidated Public Works Department. One of the really important things to note here is we want to celebrate the historic and uniqueness of this site. this is a special site, and it needs to be respected. We want to design a showcase for innovative and sustainable stormwater management, and we also want to promote smart growth and compact development. These are things that we've been talking about in our comprehensive plan for years, and we want to be really exemplary in that duty to the city as we implement our master plan. We want to create a context-sensitive design on a site like that with that kind of geography and topographical opportunities, we'll call them, as well as sitting in a neighborhood that is bounded on one side on the north by Blue Heron Paper Company. We have the Moot, we have the Old Arts Cafe, we have all the historic houses, we have Waterboard Park, we have a bluff. This is a place where it's really important to do the context-sensitive design to make sure it fits. And, of course, from my perspective, I want to make sure that I'm optimizing our existing site, using it effectively, and making sure we're building a cost-effective facility that is not overusing our ratepayers' dollars. And, John, why are we here? I think you're going to tell us about some of the information about our needs. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I've been elected as the most needy person, so I get to go over the needs of this project. So there's a lot of them, and I'm going to read through them fairly quickly. I've prepared notes here, so bear with me if you will. Our shop storage is scattered. We often need things that are in other yards or other buildings, so we have to make a special trip from the lower side to the upper side. Our layout is poor. Our office spaces are laid out poorly, and the strained site circulation. Our fleet maintenance work areas, as shown in the picture, the upper picture here, they're pretty frustrating. That makes for tight operating conditions inside that fleet shop. We've got 2 bays. That's one of them. The picture in the bottom shows 116 South Center Street. It's a neighboring building that we purchased. You're used to seeing the Operations Center, which looks much nicer than this particular building. But this one's one that we've acquired, and we plan to include in our overall plan. It's structurally deficient. It's kind of an odd space. We struggle to use that space. It's outdated electrically and plumbing. It's outdated. It needs a roof. It's unsightly, and it's in disrepair. Again, it's a very congested site. That picture up to the upper left kind of shows about that 4 o'clock, 4:30 hour where vehicles are coming in. We tend to get several vehicles in there. It's pretty congested. We've got very expensive equipment which is exposed to inclement weather. So let me go back. We've got a couple of vehicles here, our vac-ons, that we need those throughout the snow and ice season, and they're exposed. We try and blanket them with blankets, but we definitely appreciate better covered buildings and more parking spaces that are protected from the weather. It's definitely designed for smaller vehicles. We've got inadequate drainage facilities in this lower yard. We actually experienced flooding ourselves during the January 1st event, and that resulted in shop flooding and actually water in my office. If you can appreciate, we've got in this area right here, this is our sewer decant area. We also use that urge to bag sludge, so all wastewater, Vector waste, we drain to a catch basin there that drains to the sanitary. Any solids that are associated with that we scoop up and bag, and I just thought I'd mention that it's really just a breath away from our lunch space and break space, so it's not the best situation for us. So this is an aerial photograph of our yard. The areas where I was talking about are right here. We were just looking at the yard space. This is our main operations building, the 116 South Center Street building. In order to get from one yard to the other, whether you're a pedestrian or a vehicle, you've got to go up Center Street, turn on John Adams, South John Adams, and up and into our upper yard. There's the Armory building, the larger upper building, and the Cannery building. I consider the upper yard as organized mayhem. It works because it must work. Portions are unfenced and open to the public. We experience vandalism, loitering, dumping, and theft. In my opinion, it's pretty unsightly despite our efforts to keep it clean, and the roadway's in disrepair. It's not well illuminated, limited building access, and the underground utilities. We've got the Armory building sewer lateral that crosses underneath the big building. We've got a dead-end water line that stops on our site, which is a small diameter pipeline and limited fire suppression on that site. So anything we do new will have to improve those utility improvements. We also have very little in the way of surface water detention or water quality filtering for any site runoff on the upper yard. So these are not garden sheds that need a little dressing up. These buildings are in disarray. Building layout is inefficient for our needs. The large warehouse is structurally unsound. Its use is very limited and impractical for our needs. The small warehouse is difficult to access. Cannery building is it's a long building. It's got length to it, in other words, but it's pretty narrow. So one vehicle, we have to stack our vehicles in that if we want to store them in there. So getting them in and out is kind of a challenge. It's also pretty dilapidated. Our fleet space is inadequate. Employee safety due to very tight working conditions is a daily concern. Working conditions associated with equipment maintenance during inclement weather is shameful. Trying to put chains on large vehicles, we just can't get them in their shop spaces. So we do it outside, and we do a lot of it. So by the end of the shift, our mechanics and people helping them are pretty worn. Mechanics' efficient use of time is compromised every day due to the shop size. These pictures all kind of represent that. I don't have time to go through them, but it's a good depiction. Just more kind of how we do things, mostly outside for the larger vehicles. So our office spaces, we're definitely lacking space, limited reception area. We're non-ADA compliant, seismically vulnerable buildings, limited capacity for management to oversee the work of line staff while at the operations center. We now hold crew meetings in our assembly and indoor shop parking areas. That's kind of this area right here. Ongoing inefficiencies like heating, lighting, outdated phone, and electrical systems are all needs that we have on a daily basis. Lasers underneath.
Well, Nancy's described the process. John has described the needs for this master plan, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the site design and why we designed the site the way we did, and I'll try to keep my comments brief. But I think inherent in the appeal, and many of the issues in the appeal and some of the comments we've heard, is the idea that this is not an appropriate site for public works. And there's no question that it is an unusual site. And for a Public Works and Operations Department because of the split level. But the more we looked at it, and we, as Nancy said, we've been looking at this since 2004, not continuously, but we've certainly been thinking about it since then. But the more we looked at it, the more we began to realize that it really held a lot of opportunities, and with the right approach, we could turn the challenges into real benefits, not just for the Public Works Department, but also the community. So the first challenge, I think, was to figure out how to connect the two sites and essentially flatten the site. And so this is the bluff right here. And so the idea that we came up with was to put a four-story building right here for two reasons. One is because the operations department right now, the office building portion is here. So it would allow this building to be built while this is still in operation. Then, once this is built, this could be torn down and then they could move into this building. So what it does is it has a number of benefits that come out of it. One is that it provides an elevator that essentially connects the two sites so that the staff has greater communication with the upper site and the lower site. So both now they have to either drive around or walk circuitously up this hill. And it also nestles into the bluff. This is a kind of a corner-shaped portion of the bluff that's 40 feet high. So it really helps with the scale of the building, too, because it nestles that building into that. And it creates more opportunity for utilization of the site because it compresses the footprint of the buildings on the site. So it really holds multiple benefits, just that one key piece to it. Building up instead of out allows the facilities to be built to conserve land and to save money. Increasing density in the center of the town where existing transportation infrastructure and utility infrastructure is already there to support it is also a benefit, I think. For those who are concerned about the density of a four-story building or the mass, the scale of that, I always say that it's really more of an issue of design rather than density. And there are many ways to mitigate in terms of architecture, how you shape a building, if you step it back, which is what we've proposed. This is really just a framework plan. We're not designing the building at this point. We're trying to design it in such a way that whoever does design these buildings has a framework they can work with to make that building fit in with the context of the site. And it is a mixed-use neighborhood. I mean, this is mixed-use development. I think in its best form, because there are civic functions there already in the city hall that's moving in. There's other small businesses. There are residences for sure, but that's what mixed-use development is all about, and it enlivens a neighborhood. It adds vitality to it. Connectivity, I think, is another very important point, that this is a connection not only just for the function of the Public Works Department, but for the community as well. There's a promenade that's now being built along the bluff. That's a couple blocks away. That promenade can connect through the street system to this development, up to the site, through to Waterboard Park, just the way we've provided these connections at both ends of the development for that pedestrian connectivity. And then sustainability has been a key point, as Nancy mentioned, from the very beginning. John and Nancy both have just had a passion for that, explained that, insisted at the very beginning of the project that this was going to be a demonstration project, not just for stormwater management, but also for architecturally. And without going into a lot of detail, there are many ways to do that, but what we've tried to do, again, as a framework plan, is to orient the buildings and design the buildings in such a way that they're set up for really good sustainable design. So they're all oriented on the upper side on an east-west axis, which means the broad sections of the roof face south that could be used for solar panels, either photovoltaics or hydronic panels. They could be green roofs incorporated. It could be stormwater collection off of the roofs. We've designed a stormwater detention facility over here that would naturally flow to the lower side of the site, off the bluff into a cistern that would collect water that could be used for landscape irrigation, possibly building uses, even flush trucks for washing streets. So we've really thought through this, not just in addition to just the traffic flow and how it might work best, planning so that all of the traffic goes straight through in a forward motion, even in the shops, so that they don't have to back up and the beepers don't go off on the trucks, the backing of the trucks. So there's a lot of thought that has gone into the framework, even though we're not designing the buildings. Architecturally, this will be my concluding remarks. Architecturally, this does not have to be an unattractive facility, and I think that's another comment that has been brought up. There are many examples, both locally and nationally, of award-winning, beautiful, public works type facilities. There's one example that comes to mind under the St. John's Bridge in Portland, the water treatment facility there that's beautifully landscaped, beautiful buildings, won many awards nationally, and if you've ever walked around there, it's like a park setting, and it's a very utilitarian function. So in summary, yes, this isn't a challenging site, but we think we not only have overcome these challenges, but turned them into real opportunities. And I think that's what the history of Oregon City is all about. It's a town whose character has grown out of the falls, the steep terrain, the rocky bluffs, and the architecture that is creatively adapted to that. I think that's really very much in character with the culture and the history of Oregon City, and that's what makes this town so unique, and that's why we think this is an appropriate use of this site. Yeah, I think we can probably just skip this. This one is fine. Or should I talk about this?
We have a question.
You can wait to the end.
Huh?
You can wait to the end.
I thought he just finished.
You want to wait till the whole
I did-
presentation is finished? You can wait.
It's
I'm the last up, and it's 2
And then
minutes.
a quick closing
Well,
remark.
my concluding
by
remarks,
myself.
sorry.
They don't have a chance.
Okay,
But I'm going to want to go back
Okay,
to the slide
Commissioner.
you just showed.
Okay.
okay, very quickly. My name is Ben Schoenberger from Winterbrook Planning. I'm advising Public Works and working with staff on the regulatory side of things, on the zoning issues. So I'd like to address the appeal itself and the land use criteria. Tony's already beat the drum pretty strongly about how, this is a land use hearing and we are dealing directly with the criteria here. And so we've prepared a memo that since there's enough overlap with what Tony has talked about, the one that's in front of you from Nancy addresses a lot of the same issues, so I won't go over that all again. But just to say generally, a lot of those don't relate to specific criteria, and we really have to focus on those as whether you approve or deny the appeal and the application. The Planning Commission agreed that all those things were met, and we agree. More generally, we anticipate some testimony from appellants about the impacts of this, and there is a approval criteria that relates to both identifying impacts and mitigating for those. Public Works did that. On page 8 of that memo, there's a table that describes generally the impacts or potential impacts of this proposal, and both how the Public Works and this concept master plan addresses those, and if they weren't sufficiently addressed, that the staff and then Planning Commission layered on another layer of conditions that ensured that those criteria and standards were met. So there's been a number of layers of a proposal, modifications to the proposal, and conditions recommended by staff, and additional conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, all to ensure that these impacts were adequately mitigated. These are impacts on the neighborhood. That's something that we've heard, is that impacts on whom, not just on Public Works, but in fact these are all things that are reflective of the neighborhood. So we did try to address those. I know adjustments is going to come up as an issue. It has briefly already. There are a number of adjustments. They're all relatively minor things. I'll just quickly height increase for the main building so that the top floor of that building can actually connect to the upper site. We're dealing with a very steep basalt cliff. Setback standards, most of which are internal setback standards. The way the code is written, it's from the edge of the district. So there are a number of places where it's impractical to meet a 25-foot setback on a property that abuts other city property. Distances for parking aisles from 24 to 20 feet. I won't go into any detail on that. And then the last two are for exemptions from institutional and commercial building standards and historic overlays, just for the upper site. In this case, those sections of the code were designed specifically to encourage the pedestrian friendliness and the historic qualities of institutional and commercial areas. This is essentially a functional site, aside from the rest that doesn't have public access in the normal sense of the sort of pedestrian-friendly things of that code. So we requested an adjustment for that in the context of already having gone to the Historic Review Board and received their endorsement of, especially the fifth adjustment, the historic overlay standards, that would be an acceptable outcome if there were certain modifications to landscaping and so on. If you have specific questions about those, we can address those later on. To point back again to something Commissioner Neely said, this is not the end of the process. This is a concept master plan. It's a framework for a 20-year framework for future development. And when actual building proposals, actual development happens here, a detailed development plan, which includes effectively, as Tony said, a site plan and design review will have to happen through each stage of this process. So in addition, the HRB, the Historic Review Board, will have another opportunity to weigh in with those particular designs, especially for the office building. And, of course, there's financial and budget issues that you'll also have control over. So this isn't the end of the game. This is the first step in a process. But we're really excited about the plan and then think it has a lot of momentum and ask that you support the application. So
And-
Nancy's going to wrap
yes,
it up.
And in closing, we believe that the site at 122 South Center, extending up onto South John Adams, is unique and offers really tremendous opportunity to create an amenity for Oregon City and an efficient public works center that functions smoothly. We believe, as I stated in my memo to you, that there are some items that should be considered ground rules for future design, and that be that we achieve excellence within an approved budget, that we be context sensitive, that we enhance the location and instill public pride with this facility. We provide security where needed. That's an absolute necessity. We carefully integrate the building and site systems as well as the surrounding natural systems. We celebrate the on-site and surrounding geography and history. We use the most advanced approaches as possible and within approved budget to conserve energy and water use or reuse. So we thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation and are available for questions at any time during this public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's what I'd like to do is have Commissioner Nocita ask his question, and then we need to vet Commissioner Smith, and then we'll go to a break before we continue the public hearing. Commissioner
you.
Nocita.
I'd like to call that map up again. Access to the upper area, is it going to be both through John Adams and will it continue to be through Center Street as well? Will both those accesses be available?
Yes. This is the access through Center Street. This is the access on South John Adams. We've proposed through the traffic management plan that large trucks go one way down South John Adams to the north, and that at off hours during the day that they would try to limit traffic to Center Street, the access off of Center Street.
During the day, you say?
No, off hours.
Oh, off hours.
Off business hours, to the extent possible.
Okay, Commissioner West.
So everybody saw me here shake my head because I thought I knew something differently. So South John Adams is a one-way to all vehicles going on it between 9 and 5, or just to large trucks? Okay, so that's both ways. In the South Center, the down there, that's both ways all of the time.
Yes.
Okay.
It is important to note, in case you haven't noted it in your packet, that right now there is public traffic that goes through the site. And it's not a public road, though. It just has been open for a long time. And there's quite a bit of traffic that uses that as a cut-through. We are proposing that we close that to through traffic, have it only be public works site on top there, and but that our heavy, large public works vehicles be limited to one-way traffic going north or downhill on John Adams to cut somewhat noise, and also just to have fewer large vehicles on that road. But we do need it for one-way, for site circulation.
And also, the trucks are not coming up the South Center. They're only going the one way, correct?
South Center would be used for two-way traffic for all vehicles.
Oh, all vehicles.
John Adams would be for large trucks would be limited to downhill or exiting traffic for the trucks over large trucks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neely.
You were talking about closing the road there. Is there any thought to having some kind of a pedestrian access through the property? From John Adams down to Center Street?
We have thought about that. We're also trying to figure out a way to go around the property. We're really concerned about security. As John mentioned, we've had a number of incidences, and while the chief has stepped out, we have been encouraged to make sure that the entire site is secured. But we want to make I, for one, and the department really is super excited about making sure there's pedestrian connectivity in some way around the site.
Okay. We'll have additional opportunity for questions, but I want to make sure we get to Commissioner Smith. So, Mr. Kobeisman, would you please walk him through the steps?
Sure, Mayor Norris and Commissioner Smith, good to see you here. I know you came in a significant, you caught a significant portion of the applicants.
Parent-teacher conferences, so apologize.
Some things, but wanted to go through a few issues. We can talk about the process that everybody had, but wanted to make sure you're aware of bias, conflict of interest, and ex parte contacts. We'll start with ex parte contacts. Have you had any ex parte contacts?
No, I have not.
Any challenge from the audience? Seeing none. The conflict of interest and bias are a little unusual in this case because the city is applicant as well as the decision maker. Conflict of interest is probably the easier one here as well. Conflict of interest under Oregon law is limited to whether you have a direct, whether you or any member of your family have a direct pecuniary interest in that may or will be affected by this decision. Are you aware of any direct pecuniary?
I don't think so. I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, but that's about it.
Okay. Any challenge to the commissioner on that basis? Seeing none, the final one is bias, and as I mentioned, the city is both the decision maker and the applicant in this case. There's been an allegation of bias directed at the Planning Commission, but it also could be read to apply to the City Commission. Luba has indicated in several cases that there is no really other decision maker than the City Commission to do this. The critical question for you is whether you can judge this decision independently of any other decisions you may have made or will make or may make on this in the future, and look only at the evidence in the record as well as the criteria on the land use code to make your decision on this application on that evidence and those criteria. Do you believe you?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Any challenges to the commissioner on that basis? No.
And Commissioner Neely has a statement.
Yeah, I forgot an ex parte contact. Basically, somebody called me, I don't know even the name of the person, actually calling me about a matter unrelated to this, specifically the code development. And then after he berated me for about 15 minutes on that, he brought up about 10 or 15-ish other issues. He apparently lives in this area, and this was one of them, and I completely forgot about that. But I don't even know who the individual was.
Was there any evidence or substance that
No.
you...
Well, no, the only thing he didn't mention was concerned about truck traffic, and I think he was, in fact, referring to John Adams, but that's the only specific thing that I recall.
Any further questions or challenge to the Commissioner Neely based on that ex parte contact? Seeing none, it doesn't appear that there's an issue with that.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I just
Yes.
add one quick thing real quick in response to Commissioner Neely's question about the pedestrian connectivity through the site? It was discussed quite a bit by the Planning Commission because there is a connection identified on the Trails Master Plan. And so what the Planning Commission did is actually, the applicant had identified this new pedestrian connection to connect to the existing path at Waterboard Park to get around the site, and the Planning Commission conditioned that actually occur as part of the first phase, rather than delaying that because of the importance of providing that connectivity.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Do you need to just before the break?
If we continue questions after the break, I'm fine
Sure.
with questions.
Sure. Yeah. No, we'll begin where we're ending. So we'll recess for about 7 minutes. We are back in session, and we are concluding with the questioning of staff. So you must be here for the beginning of the public testimony. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Nacita, I believe you had a question.
So,
I did. I wanted to ask Ms. Crosshauer to elaborate on the term you used for this project as an amenity.
Oh, as an amenity? Well, I think, as an amenity, I think it is, if you look at the, let's start with the upper site, because that's pretty straightforward. Starting with the upper site, right now, I think the upper site is maybe the opposite of an amenity for the community. It is dilapidated buildings that, granted, have been there for a very long time, but it's an area where we get a lot of graffiti. The site is being underutilized. We can actually have more efficient use of personnel, which I believe that is an amenity for the public. And so there's aesthetic issues, and then there's also the operational issues, both of which would fit into being an amenity. And then the other thing, I think, what can be done is using the lower site, using that geography to design a building that really is molded into that basalt cliff in a way that you get height with the building, so more space within a smaller footprint, and then you can still have your space for your parking, kind of like we talked about at Urban Renewal tonight, really, with the FARs. And so that, again, you're getting a lot more function out of the existing amount of space, so we don't need to sprawl out onto either adjoining properties or find a big piece of land that we could use for something else, say in the urban growth boundary expansion areas or something like that. And I think I'm looking at it both in terms of how we improve the way we manage surface water on the site, how we use energy on the site, how we reuse surface water on the site, and also how we create better architecture for the area, for that part of town. And then there's also John mentions there's the trail access, which we're going to provide around the site, make that better, and really improve the overall looks of both the lower level and the upper level and make it work much more efficiently.
So as far as access, I think that it was mentioned that although there will be trail possibilities around the site itself will be secure. So I, as a pedestrian, would not be able to kind of walk through the site.
I think there are possibly parts of it, especially if we were trying to, there's a Planning Commission condition of approval that we provide some historic educational information that's available to the public to view. And so we'd want to make sure there's parts of the site, and maybe where we're doing some of the stormwater detention or water quality treatment, and if we could combine an educational component with that. I think we can look at allowing access to specific areas of the site, but not through the site, not into the building, not into the yard, of that nature.
And remind me how the Armory fits into all of this?
Well, we would like to acquire the Armory, and that property was actually originally part of the whole site, and then the National Guard, when they were building armories throughout the entire country, chose that site to build the building, and when they vacate the building, the property goes back to the city, and that's something that they're still using it for some purposes, and we've initiated some conversations with them about a property transfer.
Do you have a specific use plan for the Armory site?
The
Storage, and we park trolleys there now, we rent that space from them, so we'll continue to do that. Look that large vehicle maintenance on those trolleys, we'll have them.
Oh, excuse me, John, you'll need to come to the
Sorry,
microphone.
John, I was hoping it was a one word.
Mostly storage, but there's also office space in there that we're not planning to put staff in, but we need to find some use
So the
for that.
Armory's use when the Public Works Department acquires it will be mostly a utilitarian use?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And we're not planning to tear it down. That building will remain, it's a great building. It'll remain in place.
Okay, there's an opportunity for questions later. Can you do it now?
You want me to ask?
Yeah, you can do it now if you need to.
It doesn't matter.
Up to you.
Okay.
Commissioner West.
Well, one of my concerns is limiting, I understand for safety reasons that you would want to not have that whole site open to the public, but one of my issues or concerns is how you get up to Waterboard Park, and if the access to that will be limited, enhanced. And you mentioned a trail, but, and so, with the trails, the second part, then phased in now, later. It'd be nice if you could have the trails
That was
Phase
a
one.
Planning Commission requested that we do the trail
first. Oh, good.
Which is,
But can you show me how you'll get up in,
have we designed that, really? I mean,
Center Street.
because
yeah,
Because
David-
clearly,
yeah.
like, I usually
Don't
walk
talk,
from
just
John
show.
Adams and cut through, but that won't be there.
So David Hyman will show us how the trail will work. And then around the back and down to John Adams.
So does that trail, you started on Center Street and came up the driveway to that new trail, correct?
Well, it's to a different access, to a different
It's a
juncture in the
lower,
road.
yeah, it's a
Right.
lower access to get to the upper,
Well, go back,
to Center.
sir.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you were using your laser pointer. The trail that's new, that's kind of on the bottom of the picture to the left, how do I get to that trail?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One is you can walk up the street from here.
walk up the street from
Access it
center.
right there. The other way that we've talked about is having an outside stair here that you could access the site and walk behind the fence, on the public side of the fence, to the trail that way.
Oh, that would work too.
Now,
So again, utilizing the building for vertical transportation.
from the center street up that driveway, have the conflicts between pedestrians and truck traffic been addressed?
Well, that's why we've offered this other alternative, which would be a dedicated stair. It would be a stair that would serve the building, but would also be open to the public.
So if I'm on the McLaughlin Promenade, to get to this trail without fighting trucks going up from Center Street, I'd actually have to physically go through the new Public Works building?
No, it would be an outside stair.
An outside stair.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we're hesitant to make perfect promises about that staircase, because without the building being designed and the rest of the site being designed, we hope to do that, but we also need to get through the structural design process. And when you are up around the Public Works facility, Commissioner Nacita, it's surprising that there's really not like regular truck traffic. It's not like out on Molall Avenue where it just never stops. It's really pretty quiet around there most of the time. So I don't think there would be tremendous conflicts between a pedestrian and most of the truck traffic on Center Street, the driveway anyway.
Commissioner West.
But there will be no access from John Adams
For trucks
to get up into Waterboard Park.
Yes. Pedestrians?
Okay, sorry, pedestrian
Well,
access.
and that's right, let's see, right here. This is the connection, right next to the armory is where it connects to the trail system and loops
So
through
that's the
park.
same road where it is now?
Yes.
Okay, I for some reason thought you were saying that was closed off.
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought so too.
Thank you.
Okay,
So
Commissioner
nothing's
Nocita.
closed off.
Then a quick demonstration of where the points of closure would be to make this site secure.
Right now, the point of closure is right here. There's a gate, right here, so that's why that's turnaround is here. So if a car comes up the street and the gate is closed, there's a way to turn around and go back. On this side, we had the gate over here, well, at one time we had the gate over here, but we've moved it here, so again, with a turnaround. And the other reason we've done that is because to make this more of an amenity, this is a natural landscape area, and the stormwater detention pond now can become more of an amenity for the neighborhood. It also functions for Public Works.
Be upgraded, yeah.
Right, so it's a park-like setting is the way we envision it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds nice.
All right, I'd like to get into public testimony, and I believe you've changed the order, so I do not have the new order. If someone could bring that here, that would be great. I have Daniel Cairns first, so, and I know Denise McGriff, but it would help.
Actually, Mayor, I'm going to open, and then I'm going to vacate. So Denise McGriff, the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and our address is P.O. Box 1027,
You just need to give your place you live.
Oregon City, Oregon. We want to thank you on behalf of the Neighborhood Association for requesting to open this process, and also we wish that we hadn't had to appeal. We feel very strongly about the impacts of this particular use on our portion of the neighborhood, and we feel very strongly that we have a lot of points that we feel that are beyond the professional staff that has been hired, and obviously there are professional staff too, since the tax dollars are paying for all these wonderful people here sitting behind me. But as you know, we're citizens. We work, we live here. We're not professional planners. We're not professional traffic engineers. We're not noise people, but we live in the neighborhood, and we know what we know about what happens in our neighborhood. So with that, I'd like to introduce, as you said, Dan Cairns, who is at this time representing us, and he has some remarks that he'd like to present to you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Daniel Cairns. I'm an attorney. I represent the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. I've submitted a short memo. It's not evidence at all, and I suspect there's not going to be a whole lot of maybe no new evidence this evening. This goes over legal points that I'll talk about, so you don't have to be reading this
Did you
while
submit
I'm
that this
speaking.
evening? We don't
Yes.
have it yet, so.
Two procedural issues before I get going. One is, I would ask that I don't know what your intention is, I would ask that the commission not make a decision tonight. I think the record is quite large, it'd take a long time to get through it. There are a lot of points that people are going to raise tonight, and so I don't think you'd be doing any justice to the cause, to the decision-making process if you rush to a decision. Also, as a matter of law, I don't think you could. The staff report was available, as far as I know, on Friday afternoon. 3:47 in the afternoon is when it became publicly available, and state law requires it to be at least 7 days pre-hearing. So I don't think anyone's rushing to have a decision on this. We want a well-reasoned decision. And that leads me to the points I'm going to talk about. There was a long laundry list of issues that Mr. Kunkel went through at the beginning, and it's in his staff report. Most of those are political or policy issues, and you'll hear a lot of testimony from the people tonight. And I think it's appropriate for you to take those into consideration, because it hasn't really been emphasized enough that you're not just a decision maker here. You are the applicant. It's not Ms. Crashauer. She just represents the Public Works Department. The applicant is the City of Oregon City. You are the governing body of the City of Oregon City. It's your shop, it's your buildings, it's your facility here, and you have to follow the approval criteria that apply here, but also you get to decide what your application looks like and whether it is compatible with the neighborhood or not. And you heard that Ms. Crashauer and the entire department is committed to making this development compatible and consistent with this neighborhood, and I think a lot of the people are here to tell you tonight that it isn't going to be that way. So the few issues I'm going to talk about are relating to the few things that have to do with the legal criteria here, and those are limited primarily to the variance criteria. You've heard testimony from the applicant, from your staff, that this site is very, very good, offers a lot of opportunities to make this development very consistent, compatible with the neighborhood. It requires a huge number of variances to do that.
Mr. Cairns, I just wanted to clarify. You're talking
Commissioner
about
Nocita?
adjustments, not variances, I think?
Correct.
Adjustments.
You call them adjustments. Adjustments, and these are variations from usually from numeric standards, but I'll get into exactly some of those that kind of go beyond that. One thing before I talk about that is that the design is firm, but yet it's not firm. And one issue that it warrants discussion, most of the findings that I'm going to be talking about are from the staff report from July 22nd, a long time ago, the big Planning Commission staff report. So I'll refer to page numbers there. That's where the findings are for this decision that you're reviewing. They're in this large staff report. So what I'm talking about is the second of the concept plan approval criteria that requires that the transportation system be adequate and safe. And there's talk about the access from John Adams and also from Center Street, and that traffic will be large trucks be dissuaded from going out John Adams and directed more to Center Street. These are critical issues for the Neighborhood Association, and there are findings in this Planning Commission decision that indicate that these kind of changes have to be made in order for this approval standard to be met. But there aren't any conditions that require that. So that's what I get at. There are a number of, you're being asked to approve this kind of general amorphous plan with a lot of trust us, we'll work out the details later, but yet they are proposing to get through these pretty specific approval criteria now with promises of what that will be like. And it will, as a matter of law, it can only get through these approval criteria that apply if these assumptions become real, that if you require them. So, for example, with regard to where the access is going to be, primarily, there are two conditions, the last two conditions from the staff report, that both of them, there's conditions 17 and 18. The applicant shall investigate. The applicant shall investigate. Using a mirror in one case to make it a safer intersection, and also dealing with the asphalt width. I would suggest to you that if there's some condition that needs to be required to make this approval criterion met, it has to be a condition of approval. That means something. With regard to the variances, and those are dealt with on page 15 and beyond in this staff report, as a preliminary matter, there are a number of things that cannot be varied, and one of them is any regulation that contains the word prohibited. And one of the variance categories, one of the variances that's being sought, is a complete exemption from all of the institutional and commercial building design standards in the code. So it's a little difficult for me to understand how this development is going to be made consistent and compatible with the neighborhood if they're asking to be exempt completely from all those standards. Those standards, which is code section 17.62.055, contains the word prohibited. So I would suggest to you that it cannot be adjusted.
Just to repeat that criteria, the code section.
The code section, it's the fourth adjustment that's being requested, an exemption from all of the design standards that are applicable to institutional and commercial buildings, code section 17.62.055.
Thank you.
It contains the word prohibited twice, in fact. So I don't believe it's eligible for a variance. The only approval criterion for of an adjustment is that granting the adjustment will equally or better meet the purpose of the regulation to be modified. So they're asking for a complete exemption from all of the design standards for institutional and commercial buildings. And the only explanation is that the site won't be open to the public. Well, I suspect that the public will be there on business associated with the Public Works Department, but also it's certainly visible from the surrounding neighborhood, from the park, and also the employees that work there. All of the institutional and commercial building standards, design standards, aren't just for parks, aren't just for tourists. These are people who live in these communities, who work in these communities as well. So I would suggest to you that it can't be varied. The standard hasn't been met. The purpose hasn't been addressed, and I think it's, as a matter of policy, something you should not allow an adjustment for. The fifth of the adjustments is in the same category, where they're asking for adjustment, complete exemption from all of the historic overlay district standards. Again, it's impossible for me to understand how this will create better architecture for the area. That context and compatibility are so important when they're seeking an exemption from all of the historic design requirements for the site that would otherwise apply. Again, just because they say the site is not open to the public. Well, I don't think that if someone were to build a manufacturing facility here could get away with that kind of justification because, well, just my employees will be here, there will be no customers. It's not open to the public. Well, it's in a public context. It's visible from the public right-of-way. It's visible from public park, those sorts of things. So I would suggest actually and visually and virtually it is open to the public, and neither of these sets of standards should be varied. The other variances that are being sought to building height for the administrative building, again, one of the assumptions is that there are mitigating factors that will be stair-stepped. Well, there's no requirement in here that happen. There are a number of ways that building could be designed that might mitigate the reduction of the exceeding of the height limit and also reduction of the setback. But they're not being required as conditions of approval, and they need to be if the city is going to find that these adjustment criteria are met. Also, if you look at the only standard that applies is that the adjustment, granting the adjustment, will equally or better meet the purpose of the criterion. The purpose, really, for all of these standards in this zone, or the purpose of the district, to facilitate the development of major public institutions, government facilities, and parks to ensure the compatibility of these developments with the surrounding areas. And I would suggest to you that none of these adjustments meet that standard. None of them make this development more compatible with the surrounding area than making you comply with all of these standards. And I think, quite frankly, that there's just too much being proposed for this site. That is too tight. And that maybe if it were redesigned to avoid these variances, it would justify some other, maybe taller buildings. If there was some more commitment to the design that would mitigate the height, the setback variances, adjustments might be justified if there's some design features that were committed to, that were part of the decision, that you could say as a matter of law justified those because they are conditions of approval, and they aren't. So the findings, as I read them, the only findings before you, they really don't talk about at all the purposes for any of these. The only explanation is basically, well, we don't have room on the site. No kidding. And it's also not going to be open to the public, which I do not believe is true. So with that, those are the legal points, and you will hear a lot more from the people who live in this community about, well, how incompatible could this be?
Okay, thank you. Since you've presented the bulk of the report and I've let you go for a long period of time, I would like to now set the timer because we do have a number of speakers. I want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear everybody. So we will go to the 3-minute timer. How it works is this. You'll see a green light. That means
This thing flashing right here.
when you begin speaking, it's on the top, actually. And then when the yellow light flashes, you have 30 seconds more, which summarized when the red light, that's the end of your time. So you can sort of self-adjust as you see that happen. It will stay there. You can see it. I think. Please move so you can. Okay, next, we have Gordon Wilson, and I would like you to come in pairs, if you would, followed by Frank Whalen. Both of you would. That will expedite, I think, make it faster. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gordon Wilson. I live in Oregon City. I wrote a letter today explaining my concerns about the Oregon City Public Works Master Plan CP0901. Takes like 14 minutes to read, about only 3 minutes, so I'll try to paraphrase it as quickly as possible. My first concern is that the Oregon City Master Plan CP0901 is a violation of Oregon City zoning laws, in that it's in an institutional zone, and in an institutional zone, it is to ensure the compatibility of these developments with the surrounding areas. And we've had numerous expert testimony from realtors and doctors about the compatibility issues with this development here in this neighborhood, resulting in ill health from the diesel fumes and, declining in sustainability, livability, and property values. And just if I live there, and I can imagine going from what it is now to, 20 cars to 70 cars or trucks and a fueling station. I mean, it's serviced by 2 little roads surrounded by a cliff, and trying to get a fuel truck in there is a disaster waiting to happen. My second concern is that Oregon City Master Plan CP0901 violates the Oregon City's comprehensive plan. The Oregon City Comprehensive Plan talks about how the Commission is supposed to preserve natural resources. And on this site are numerous Category 5 resources: oak savanna, wetlands, rocky buttes that supposedly give Oregon City its character. And this plan proposes to bulldoze it and surround it by barbed wire fence and pave it, which is a violation of the Oregon City Comprehensive Plan, I feel. Concern number 3 in the Oregon City Master Plan states that the site is located in the Tumwater drainage basin, and that during heavy rain events, the flow from the upper site creates a waterfall over the cliff to the lower site. Well, it doesn't seem intelligent to me to put a fueling station in a truck and gravel yard in a place where that's waterfall prone. I mean, it just seems like a disaster, an ecological disaster waiting to happen. My other concern is that in 2005, they did a study. They went to Tualatin and Milwaukee's Public Works to see, what they're doing. And when they went there, they saw that Tualatin had 10 acres and Milwaukee had 8 acres in 2005, and both Public Works needed more. Well, this total acreage is about 5 acres. And it's difficult to develop, and like I said, it's destroying our natural resources, and so I have a concern about that, and I guess that's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can we ask questions of individual?
No, I don't. Well, I guess that's up to us, but I think we want to wait till I think it's.
Well, then we'd be calling people who testify back to the
You wish to?
microphone.
Okay, just make it succinct.
It's
Right.
very quickly.
Commissioner Sita.
You cited the institutional zone and the question of compatibility.
Correct.
Do you have a specific citation of the code of the, I don't know if it's introductory language or?
Yes, it's under the city zoning. It states,
Do you have the section?
the purpose of this district is to facilitate the development of major public institutions, government facilities, and parks, and this is the part that I find important, and ensure the compatibility of these developments with the surrounding areas.
What section does it, do you have a number?
It's just,
the
I don't,
introductory-
It's going to be
it's
1739.
the institutional zoning or institutional district.
Thanks for
Page 4 of the
clarification.
staff report, from the
Got
July
it?
staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Whalen.
Good evening. My name's Frank Whelan. I'm an architect. I live in Lake Oswego. And for the record, that was my stepson speaking. To increase efficiency and reduce operational costs, Public Works would like to consolidate all its operations on one site. That's a reasonable goal. Taking a project cost, their project cost of $20 million, doubling it to include interest, means that an Oregon City family of 4 will pay $5,000 to finance this work. The public needs to be assured that this money is being wisely spent. They should be able to expect that the city has done its due diligence and explored all reasonable options to arrive at the best solution for Public Works expansion. This includes an evaluation of possible sites and their related development costs. That work has not been done. It should be done before the city commissioners appropriate money. For many of us here tonight, Public Works wrongly abandoned their site evaluation process when, for whatever economic reasons, they selected the Armory site. While the land costs may be nil, the neighborhood impact is not. This site, with views of the Cascades and Willamette River, should rightfully be parkland. Public Works belongs in an industrial area, not on scenic land, not adjacent to historical residential property. The daily elephant train of 80 dump trucks rolling through the neighborhood will be devastating. It has raised the ire of a whole community. It's penny wise and pound foolish to select a site based primarily on land cost. Improvement costs have far more impact on the final project cost. Given the difficult topography, geology, and accessibility of this site, a strong case can be made that the additional cost of building here would more than offset the purchase price of a more suitable piece of land. Now, Gordon went over the area of the property, but everyone's going to tell you it's somewhere around a quarter or a third of what eventually is needed for that property. And I estimate somewhere around 14 acres is needed. If you buy 14 acres of industrial land now, that will be a lot less expensive than an additional 7 acres of residential land in the future. Free land seems to be what's driven Public Works master plan. But if it's too small, in the wrong direction, not easily accessible, squanders scenic property, costs more to develop, and enrages the neighborhood, maybe it's time to look for another site. The public interest requires that Public Works complete the site evaluation analysis they prematurely abandoned. If consolidation saves money, wouldn't consolidating Public Works Department with Clackamas County save even more money? That could start with sharing costs for a new facility on a new site. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kathleen Cook and Damon Mady.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here, I live up on top of the hill off of Woodlawn. I'm here to represent the interests of the people that are trying to live on that property. My concerns, I don't know how many people here have driven up, say, driving up John Adams and going down Center to Center or from Center to John Adams. I don't know, it almost looks like you're closing that off, but I'm here to represent the people that are trying to live on that property. Little homes, people trying to enjoy their property and renovate it, and with huge trucks going up and down that property, I can't imagine, first of all, the roads need to be widened if that's the case. There's no way that that road can be safely traveled by the residents of that area or walked on in that area. My stand has been, since I've heard about this, is that property needs to be found in an industrial area. I look at this beautiful picture right here of Oregon City. I wish Oregon City looked like this. It doesn't. It doesn't. And I feel the same thing is happening with that beautiful piece of property that has potential of many more things than Public Works. Public Works is a really important facility for our city. It does a lot of really good things, but there's a better place for it, so that the people who live there on that property can enjoy their property safely. Thank you.
My name is Damon Mabey. I live in Oregon City, and I'm one of the commissioners that voted for this property. I should get a few other biases out of the way. I also live in McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, but I'm about as far away from this as possible, up by the hospital. And was also the person who proposed the 4-story building rather than the 3 stories that it was initially done. So some of this is my fault. Sorry. And I've already taken the tomatoes for that. But the fact of the matter is, when this was first proposed, I first saw the information in 2005 when Nancy brought it to us. I was pretty starstruck. I mean, it looks like, you're just taking something and expanding it and making it better. I wholly agree that Public Works at that current location with the current facilities is not only disrespectful to the employees, it's disrespectful to the citizens and anybody who may see that property, because it looks like we don't give a damn. And pardon my French, but, and so, yes, Public Works needs better facilities, and the employees need to be treated with the respect they deserve. They work long and hard hours, and anyway, in particular, I wrote the rebuttal section from the neighborhood on the appeal on the noise study. And so I'd refer you to page 3 of that. I know you got a huge document, but specifically some of the things that I noticed in looking at it is that they use an industrial standard. They refer to the state's industrial standard, and yet while that site is industrial, every single building around it is residential. So a residential standard of noise should be utilized. Secondly, as they went through the process of doing the noise analysis, they created a variable that doesn't exist in the state standard, LEQ. And in reading their definition of it, and this is in the appeal, so you can kind of, but in reading the definition of that, it seems to equate to the state standard of L50, and if that's the case, 5 out of 6 noise times that they used would be out of variant, would be excessive, instead of the 1 that they refer to. Additionally, most of the traffic that happens going out of the facility happens prior to the day standard that they use. Their day standard starts, I think, at either 8 or 9, and most of the trucks are going to be leaving before that time, so they should be using a night standard, which is, again, lower. And then a couple quick closing things. First, the water pollution control lab that was mentioned underneath the St. John's Bridge, it's pretty, but it doesn't work. It leaks, and it has bad air conditioning, and people are always having trouble there. And the last item is kind of more to the part B of this, about just general open comments. As the CIC chair, I sent you a letter saying that we're having problems with our vision. And I think this is an issue of that. We have a historic district and a historic district, and we're trying to get people to come and visit and walk and see it, and in the meantime, we're saying, watch out for dump trucks. So I think that needs to be thought of when we're working with this site. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next 2 speakers, Joyce Gifford and Bill Daniels.
Good evening, Commissioner and Mayor.
My name is Joyce Gifford. I live in Oregon City. And I have spoken to the Planning Commission and like to bring up to you about the traffic study. And the traffic studies that were done on the impacts on South John Adams Street, especially, they were very confusing. I didn't understand a lot of the terms that they were using, so I just had to go and see for myself what was going to be happening. And as Ms. Krushauer's mentioned, there's a lot of local traffic that heads off South John Adams and cuts across that property currently and heads out on South Center Street. When that street is closed to vehicular traffic, all of those people are going to have to be diverted onto other streets in our neighborhood. None of that was included in their traffic study. The diversion of that traffic needs to go somewhere. And now that City Hall is being welcomed into our neighborhood also, just a couple of blocks away from where this street's going to be closed off, it's going to impact even more. We have more traffic now in the neighborhood, and I haven't seen where this traffic is going to go, except for down our residential streets. People are not driving the 25 miles an hour that they're supposed to. We can see that all the time on Fifth Avenue, where they have very nicely placed those traffic cameras where they show how fast you're going. And even when one of them is just 2 blocks away from a stop sign, every day I can stand on the corner and watch people going 30, 31, and as they speed up going up the hill. So the traffic has not been addressed fully in their study. And as a geometry teacher, there is no way that a large truck coming down South Center Street can make a right-hand turn, coming down South John Adams, turning onto South Center Street, can make that turn and stay in their own lanes. The only way they can do it is by swinging around, crossing the lanes of traffic, and swinging around to make that corner. The pictures that they included in their testimony does not really show exactly what has to happen to the truck to make that corner. I would like them to show a video if they really think that a truck can make that corner safely and appropriately, because I can't geometrically see how that could ever happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Daniels, live in Oregon City. I'm going to keep this brief. Basically, this is a bad idea at the right time. We know that Public Works needs to expand. We have a chance now to make that decision in an unhurried fashion. I testified before at planning, and I sincerely believe that the other sites that were listed as alternatives were only given a cursory review. And I still believe that there are more than one site that is adequate for the capabilities of what this facility needs, and not at the current site. This is the time to review and perhaps move Public Works out of its current location. I feel that, first of all, the logistics of that site is inadequate for what they're trying to accomplish, which is to get their trucks out to the rest of the city. We know that that site is nestled up against a neighborhood with cliffs all around. It gives them an opportunity to go up South End Road, Center Road, or up Lynn Avenue. I believe, for the benefit of cost efficiency, diesel fuel being one, that the site that we could pick at a later date could be more centrally located to where the geography of the city is. And we know where the growth of the city is, and all of that needs Public Works. I truly hope that we can find a location, perhaps an industrial zone location that's current, or we could abut to come up with a better site than what's been given up here tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have some other cards, William Gifford being next. I have Phil Roadrock and Paula Blackwell. Are you still planning on testifying, those two? No? Okay. And then I have Kathy Roth, who says, is presenting new evidence. That's correct. Okay. Well, then we'll take you last. So, William, please.
Actually, Denise is not actually giving her testimony. She was just giving the introduction to our children.
Well, okay. Then, all right, the two of you then, please come together. Then you can finish up.
Again, Denise McGriff. I live in Oregon City, the land use chairperson for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. Again, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for considering this and our request. And I guess at the end, you're probably going to ask us, what do we want? But I'm going to throw out a couple of things that were brought up in testimony. I believe several of the other neighbors here have talked about the impact. I think we need to go back to 2005 and look at how we are involving our public in the development of master plans. I understand what the needs of the Public Works Department are. I'm not unsympathetic, but I don't believe there was any vetting of that with the community, whether they live in the McLaughlin neighborhood or wherever else they live. The thing that's interesting here is that many of us have lived in the neighborhood over 2 decades, some more than that, some 3 decades. We've been bringing our historic neighborhood back from the brink. As someone else testified, it's a great place to live. Public Works has been adequate for the size of the city that we had in the past. It is not adequate for the size of the city that we anticipate having now and in the future. The whole issue of livability, compatibility, are really key to us, and while they may not be specifically addressed as standards and criteria, they are a big deal to us. We are being asked to take a disproportionate share of public facilities in our neighborhood that other neighborhoods are not having to take. How many neighborhoods do you know in Oregon City that are going to have a fueling facility in their neighborhood? I don't believe there are any residential neighborhoods that have a fuel facility, but yet a fuel facility is being proposed for our neighborhood. I don't find that acceptable, and I think our neighbors don't find that acceptable. We're not talking about any NIMBY issues here. We're talking about the reality of a facilities master plan that may or may not be valid for the time that we have right now. We would have liked to have been involved. We were not involved. I don't think anybody else in the city was involved. You guys may have been involved, not you specifically at this commission, but other commission was. That was kind of it. We have addressed, we think, to you some of our concerns. There is going to be some additional new information. I think that we have an opportunity to continue to sit down and talk about this and what is going to really be best for the city, and also not ask us to continue to take a disproportionate burden of these uses. And again, to call them institutional uses, with all respect to my colleague from Winterbrook, institutional uses, whatever they may be, hospitals, and there'll be some issues coming up with Willamette Falls. I can tell you already that neighborhood's already getting up in arms about that. We need to really be thinking about that. And is that the right thing that we need to be doing?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and City Commissioners, I consider just about everybody in this room a friend of mine, and it's difficult for me to talk about this except trying to be as objective as possible. I think that most of you know me, that I tend not even to know what box it is that people think that I think outside of. I guess I just don't think the way a lot of people think. And yet, this is a legal matter that must be constructed delicately. I'm torn on choosing metaphors between counting life ships on the Titanic to death by 1,000 cuts. There are so many details involved in this that I tend to look at a much bigger picture and go back to, and I hope that you will all be sensitive to the history of this decision and how we've come to where we are now. There was a study done in 2005 that did not involve any public process. There were no citizens involved in the planning. And as a result of that planning, a consultant gave a footprint as to how big a public utility site ought to be, which is much larger than the existing site. A search was done on that large footprint, and lo and behold, there's nothing in the city that would match that footprint. So the result was, put it here, right in the Cinderella slipper. It doesn't fit, but that was the direction that the city council at that time gave the city manager. The city manager gave her engineer and public works, and they were told to make it fit. Make it fit. Regardless of the environmental impacts, regardless of the neighborhood impacts. Every point that we brought up, every one of these 1,000 cuts, has been rebutted with, well, that was not in the approval criteria. It's not in the approval criteria. Yes, I understand that, but I think that there are larger issues that need to be addressed. The viability of the existing site, it's not safe. It's not appropriate for an historic neighborhood. We should be reviewing the zoning. We should be reviewing the whole site selection process. And I would certainly urge this commission to, when you continue this process, consider very strongly overturning the Planning Commission's decision, support this appeal, go back to the site selection process, and do things right from the ground up. And let's find a safe place for this essential facility for our city.
Thank you. And the last speaker that I have, is that correct, is Kathy Roth?
Yes.
With new information.
I'm going to pass these out to you.
Netting,
This is three.
okay.
It was just three. Okay, let me...
Kathy Roth, Oregon City. You may want to look at these for the maps that are in the center of the packets. I would like to address issues suggested by the applicant this evening of reliability, preparedness, and accessibility of this site. As a biosafety professional, I deal with Homeland Security issues on a daily basis. This testimony is to advise the commissioners of conflict between the plan proposed and Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5 and the National Incident Management System, referred to as NIMS. Homeland Security number 5 makes adoption of the NIMS by state, tribal, and local organizations a condition of federal preparedness assistance. This assistance comes to cities or local governments through grants, contracts, and other activities. This does not just refer to grants and contracts for this project. It refers to all grants and contracts that come from federal money to a local government. So this could affect anything that the city got. You can look at this website for the Homeland Security directives. It's the opinion of this citizen that CP 09-01 fails in mitigation activities according to NIMS and HSPD 5 in the following criteria. Number 1, it needs to be designed to reduce loss of life and destruction of property. Number 2, it needs to comply with current land use regulations. Number 3, enforcing stringent building codes. Number 4, supporting measures to ensure the protection and resilience of critical infrastructure and key resources designed to ensure business continuity and the economic stability of the community. Number 5, periodic remapping of hazard or potential hazard zones using geospatial techniques. Number 6, objectives of resource management needed to support a critical incident must be fluid and adaptable. Number 7, must maintain a set of preparedness concepts and principles which address all hazards. Number 8, maintain awareness of critical infrastructure and key resources within their jurisdiction, potential incident impact, and restoration properties, or priorities, excuse me. Number 9, preparedness should be integrated into resource management. Number 10, it should establish and verify the levels of capability needed based on risk and hazard assessment prior to an incident. Number 11, continuity capability for facilities. Number 12, development of hazard-specific evacuation routes. Attention should be drawn to the State of Oregon LIDAR mapping project of September 29, 2006. LIDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging. This report details relative earthquake hazards as being higher and moderate in the CP09 plot. It also shows a much higher and moderate for earthquake hazards. Excuse me, I lost my place. It also shows a much larger area of the plot as being a high amplification hazard, as well as at the base of a landslide and direction of debris flow from highest hazard earthquake areas. When overlaying the Homeland Security and NIMS criteria on the most recent LiDAR mapping, it becomes clear that the area under consideration violates all of the above and increases the likelihood of the site becoming unusable in an incident of any magnitude.
Can you jump to your summary?
My
Please.
summary is this project will introduce additional hazards to the hazardous site already. I have been in contact with both members of the Senate and the House Homeland Security Committees, and have been assured that the above criteria are all being heavily considered in light of contracts to governments, especially in light of the Hurricane Katrina disaster. I would hope that the Commission can work to prevent Oregon City from becoming another lesson in how not to prepare for a disaster.
Thank you. Now, an opportunity for the applicant to rebut. Is that a choice you will be, an option you'll be taking?
I need a second. We're not very experienced at this. Why don't you go ahead?
I just have a couple of points, but I guess we would like to say that from our perspective, having additional time to respond to a lot of the issues that we've heard in this hearing for the first time at the end of this long process is something that I'm going to look over to Nancy and make sure I have a nodding head that that is something, that we would formally request that the record be left open for response to some of the issues. One of the things that I heard from a couple of people who testified was specifically in relation to this purpose statement that's part of the institutional district. So as Commissioner Nocita mentioned, and then Tony confirmed, the purpose statement for Section 1739, which is the institutional district. So 1739-010, but I think it's important that we actually look at that and what it says, because if the claim is being made that this use itself, that the facility itself is not appropriate for this district, that's just not borne out by the code. It says, the purpose of this district is to facilitate the development of major public institutions, government facilities, which is what this is, and parks. And I think a lot of people point to this clause, which we completely agree with, and ensure the compatibility of these developments with surrounding areas. So this is a purpose statement. The next section of that code says, well, here are the list of permitted uses, things that are not conditional, not prohibited, but just outright permitted in that zone. And 1739-020D is public facilities and services, including general government offices and maintenance facilities. So on the one hand, yes, they're required to be compatible with, the developments are required to be compatible with the surrounding area, but because they're explicitly permitted as an allowed use in the zone, they must somehow be possible to be done. And we think that this plan does that. And the process by doing that is exactly what we've done, is going through the master plan process and reviewing the specific development against those compatibility criteria and all the different things that we've tried to do with addressing impacts. And that specifically is the impacts criteria that I talked about, 1765-50C5, which is that the plan, including development standards and impact mitigation thresholds and improvements, adequately mitigates identified impacts. So that's really kind of the focus of what this is about, is the use itself is allowed in this district. It's just outright permitted. Now, how do you get from the use to what we've actually proposed and whether it complies? And I think that's where we're getting to the discussion of impacts. Now, have we addressed those impacts? And we believe, as I pointed at that table previously, that we have. With regard to the adjustments, again, I think these are adjustments and not variances. That's a very important distinction. There's a section of the staff report and of the decision in the code that talks about how one or more adjustments may be requested as part of this process. It doesn't say 1 but less than 5 or less than 10. It's 1 or more adjustments. And given that this is a very large site, this is a 20-year plan, and there are multiple pieces to this puzzle, I think the number of adjustments that we've asked for and what they asked for are relatively minor. Again, looking closely at what those statements about the historic overlay district and the institutional and commercial building standards say, I just encourage you to read those sections closely and imagine that they apply or don't apply to the maintenance yard elements of the upper part of the site. And buildings that front the street and certain distances from the street, which is actually not going to be open. I mean, as part of this process, it's going to be closed off, so there won't be cut-through traffic through the site. It's just not practical to or sensible to do that, and we can provide additional written testimony that addresses those the purpose statements specifically. But those are the code legal criteria things that I have to address. Nancy, do you have additional general topics?
Well, how much time do we have for the rebuttal?
I think it's 5 minutes total. Is that what it is in the 5 minutes?
There's a lot of public comments. Okay, well, I'll be brief. The couple of things quickly, and then we can just...
Did you start it at 5 minutes? Okay.
We do have information about site selection if that's something the commission would like to further discuss at some point. And in terms of traffic, we do have our traffic engineer here too, so if there's more information you want to address to Peter Coffey, we can do that at some point. There is no elephant train of dump trucks going through the neighborhood at starting time, I can tell you that. There are periodic trips from the yard, and predominantly we have pickup trucks that go to and from the operations center, and then there are small vehicles that serve the rest of the staff. In terms of widening the roads, we believe that this is part of the context sensitivity of this area is to preserve the natural beauty and to preserve the existing slopes that are there, and to widen them would be something that, from my position in working in the city for many, many years, is we have flexible design standards for roads where we have natural resources and where we have steep slopes. So I think that would cost a lot of money, and it's not just about the money, it's also about respecting the site. The other thing about site size, Tualatin and Milwaukee have been mentioned several times throughout our process. Those sites are really huge. I think they don't probably even need that much space, okay? I think that the site that we have provides adequate space for us to have a site there for 20 years. The thing also I want to remind the City Commission is we also have a master plan for our Mountain View Reservoir Complex site, and that provides, I don't remember exactly how many additional acres it is, but we use that. That's an active site that Public Works uses as well for many functions. And that was considered when we did this master plan, and this master plan was considered when we did the Mountain View master plan. The geologic hazards, very briefly, we have done rockfall studies in Waterboard Park in the past. I did not bring them because they were not part of the original Planning Commission record. And we will be working with with geologists and geotechnical engineers to assure that we are not creating a hazardous site here. Our job is to fix hazards. Our job is to protect the safety of the public. Our job is to prevent failure of private property and public property. So what we would be doing in this plan is continuing to assure the community that we're providing a safe site, and that is we have our natural hazards plan. We would not be creating more hazards, and we would be doing, and then we also, because the site is surrounded by some steep slopes, this goes through a geologic hazards land use process, and that would be something where there would be another vetting of what's being proposed and what the solutions are. So I think that probably, well, it's still green, but certainly if you'd like to talk more about site selection, we can. I think we're up against our time limit. We would like to come back and address some of the information that was just presented tonight, and then we can also talk about traffic whenever you want.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. this point, I guess I would like to close, but what, you have a question? Okay,
Yeah,
Commissioner
question on the
Nocita.
last thing Ms. Kroshauer mentioned.
Mhm.
There still remains a geologic hazards.
Yes,
Land
1744. Yes.
Why is that not being considered as part of the master plan?
It's not part of the criteria. First, you do your master plan.
Okay.
So you have a general approval for phasing for a 20, in this case, a 20-year plan, and then you come back with all your site-specific details, detailed development plan.
Okay.
And just like any other developer in Oregon City, we go through those processes.
Okay, let me just ask the commission, is it your intent that we close the public hearing, and then at next commission meeting, that it's the applicant? I think we're going to allow
We could take any extra time. I think John has something he'd really like to share.
this evening. Okay.
We'll have another public hearing the next
Well,
time around.
that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah,
because
let's- can we wait for Mr. Gevaisman to make sure we
Yeah,
get this correct?
I want to make sure that what we're doing for the rules.
Sorry.
If I close the public hearing, can we reopen it in 2 weeks on November 4th meeting, if you
Yep.
wish to?
Yes, you could reopen the public hearing later. Typically, the constraint is, again, the time pressure of the 120-day rule.
Before we close the public hearing,
Commissioner
Madam Mayor,
Nocita.
I did overhear Ms. McGriff chatting with Mr. Gevaisman regarding wanting an opportunity for what in my moot court in law school was called surrebuttal. She'd actually like to reply to the rebuttal. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to bring that, alert the commission to that interest.
I'm wondering if what we should do is, if citizens wish to speak tonight, that's something different, but for the future, if we have an opportunity of, for our Public Works Department, the applicant, to present, a 10-minute series of statements, and you can, along with written record, and then the appellant as well, so that people do have the opportunity to address issues that they've heard tonight, since we have allowed new evidence. Is that possible?
You can create whatever process you want. A couple of different constraints is that, number one, applicants should always get the final word. They have the burden to prove that they meet all the criteria. So that's one constraint. The second is, it's really a question of how much time you want to devote to this appeal. You can certainly have the applicant come back at the next commission, provide additional information. To the extent you did that, you'd probably, to the extent new evidence came in, you would probably have an opportunity you'd want to have an opportunity for other people to rebut. There's also the question of how much typically you want to narrow the time and issues as you move forward. You don't want that expanding. So those are some thoughts. I could suggest some options, or if you want to suggest some, that's however you want to handle it.
Why don't you go ahead and suggest some options, then we can have our discussion. Thank you.
What I would perhaps suggest is allow 7 days for anybody to submit new evidence in writing, and then the rebuttal actually occur at your next city commission hearing, so that there would be evidence, but only rebuttal evidence that came in, and then the statute allows for an additional 7 days for the applicant to provide final written argument, and that way you could have that happen in time for the
Next
your
meeting.
commission. You could have 7 days for
7 days.
anybody, these next 7 days. 7 days after that, which would end on the next hearing date, to provide rebuttal evidence, and you could have people testify at that meeting that night, and then have final written argument, so that your second meeting from now, what would that be? Your
November 4th.
November 4th,
Would be
you'd
written-
be
written
available to
record.
make a final decision if the commission was ready.
I prefer a written record, I think, with public testimony tonight. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner
I'm going
Neely?
to suggest, just because they're going to be rebut to the rebuttal, perhaps coming before us, that if, in fact, John Lewis had something to say, let's get it on the record now.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm going to suggest, that we hear from John, If you would like to hear from Ms. McGriff one more time, then the applicant has an opportunity to have the last word. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that the circumstance?
To figure out how much time everybody's supposedly getting. You had Nancy speaking, and then Ben spoke, and then you gave them
Yeah.
additional things.
I gave.
To be fair.
Yeah, I know, and we didn't, when both parties came to the microphone, I did not time it at the beginning. So I allowed quite expansive beginning testimony, and then the end, since you had a series of people, I did keep that short. So you're welcome to come back again if you'd like to. Okay, John, why don't you go?
Well, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. First of all, there was some discussion of a fuel facility, and I think it's important to acknowledge that we show a fuel facility on our plan. We're not talking a fueling station in terms of what I think has been presented. It's a much smaller facility, maybe a 500 or 1,000 gallon contained tank. Really, the idea was at the time we started looking at this, we were looking at alternate fuels. We couldn't, if we can't buy them commercially, and we want to have alternate fuel type vehicles in our fleet, how do we do that? So that's where that fuel facility is at. It's in Phase 4. It's a long ways out. We're not even really sure about that, but we wanted to show that in the master plan so that we had that option in the future. John Adams Street was discussed about, how unsafe that facility was for our large trucks to be on it. We've been using that facility for a long time with large vehicles. So our dump trucks, our our biggest vehicles have used John Adams. We don't use it to the level we're proposing into this plan, but we use it regularly. So we go both ways as well, up and down that hill. The 80 dump trucks, we've got 12 trucks, and there's some information in the packet. I don't remember the reference, but we've got 12 trucks that exceed 1 ton carrying capacity. And, over the course of this planning period, I think we've proposed maybe 3 additional trucks that would kind of fit into that exceedance of 1 ton. So, I don't want to overstate how much truck traffic might be on John Adams, but it's not 80 trucks. Noise, I think it's important to point out that our site plan, with the placement of covered parking, where we put our gravel bins, those kinds of facilities, they're placed around that site to shield it even much more than it is now. So right now there's nothing there. It's just the edge of the bluff, and so that could attenuate across the housing down below. With the plan that we're showing, it either kind of harbors it in the bank there or the park side of the property, or it's got hard features at the edges of that bluff. Let's see, the truck turning onto Center Street. I just want to be clear about that, because I took that picture and included that in there. We definitely use that truck turning movement often, and I would say our drivers typically would cross the yellow line to get out onto Center Street. The pictures that I took, I specifically asked the driver to approach that intersection so he wouldn't have to do that. So it requires a wider turn on the South John Adams leg to make that turning movement occur. But for all the years that we've been using that site, we've not had an incident at that location. So I think that's important to point out that it is a difficult turn with the geometry of that intersection, but it can be made. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Denise, did you want to offer something more? We have the record, and if you'd like us to reference a certain thing, and I read most of it, but I did take Evelyn Wood's speed reading dynamics in college. But if you'd like us to reference something, we do have the record, and that would be helpful, I think. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Tony and Debbie Brito, if you'd come up together, please. And for up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Debbie Brito. I live 110 Jefferson Street, and would it be too much to ask for the map that shows the
Sure, Nancy.
site plan?
Can
and
you
the
pop the map
neighborhood
up
right
there
there?
again, please? Or would it get turned off?
The map.
The map that you had previously.
It's coming. There it is.
Okay.
Okay. There was another map that showed Jefferson Street. I think it was at the very beginning. And show where we live. That'll work. Our street is from the John Adams. We live one street up. We live, I think it was the one that, it wasn't a picture, it was like a colored one. It's not there still? Okay. It was an excellent map. We have 6 boys. We use the block, Jefferson, down the alley where Gordon lives, and then we go on to John Adams, where all the trucks go. There's not 80, but there's enough that it's been dangerous for many years now. It's been a point that we have wondered about. When we moved here 10 years ago, the trucks weren't there. We could use the shortcut. It's beautiful. It's an armory. It's a neighborhood place. The armory is used for a lot of different things that we really enjoy. I think the junior ROTC at times have practiced there. Neighbors go there with their dogs up Waterboard Park. If I had a good map, I could point to all the homes that have children right across on John Adams at the end of our alley. There's only one alley past, which is Spring Street. There's, let's see, 1, 2, 3 homes that have kids, grandkids. Since we lived there in '99, we have we have 6 boys, 4 through 14. Other neighbors on our street have a lot of kids. We use that alley. They play there. I myself go walking up and down where the trucks come, and I'm usually very aware of it. Just recently, though, as I was jogging in the morning, I listened for the trucks, and I heard one coming down, and I thought, okay, I'll get out of the way real quick. But I could not judge by the sound of the truck. It was upon me before I could, not that it was going to hit me or anything, but I noticed that. I thought, ooh, as an adult, I'm trying to stay out of the way of the trucks. I'm aware of that. What about the kids? Nothing has happened so far to my knowledge, but it could very easily happen. And a good point was brought up. Have studies been done about the diversion of, the neighborhood cars, all of these things? There are a lot of kids in that neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood. We love it. Dogs walk there. I know I'm repeating myself, but as I listen to their points, I agree that there needs to be a good place for maintenance. It's so important. We support that. But not here. Please, not here.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much the same idea. What my wife is saying is our main concern is about the neighborhood. Nobody has mentioned about the residential area in around that place. There, like my wife is saying, there are a lot of kids around that area. During the summertime, they play scatter. They ride their bicycles over there. They just do regular things that kids would do. And our main concern it is trucks driving up and down the road. It is really a narrow road. If I go down on the road, I have to share the road with somebody. I can imagine a semi truck. I don't know what kind of trucks they're going to be using. Even the dump trucks, it can be a big. I don't know. It's big enough to scare a little kid, and I would hate to see my little kid getting hit by a truck. And I know you guys. I mean, I got CDL license and everything, and those trucks are huge. And then it doesn't take much to make a little mistake. And kids, they don't work. They're just running up and down, and they're on their bicycles, and sometimes they're not paying attention. So it is a main concern about our neighborhood in that area. So, yeah, when it's snowing, the guys going to be real busy, and there's snow time, and that's when the kids come out to play in the snow, and then there'll be trucks up and down, and then there goes our fun. So,
Thank you. Thank you. And then Denise, did you getting the last word or not? One of you?
We're joined at the hip.
We go in pairs.
Okay.
How it works. Strength in numbers, yes, thank you.
It's been a long evening, so make it as succinct as you can, please.
Yes, we know. Some of us have not even had dinner tonight.
Yeah, I know.
So we're here because...
We're with you.
We're here because we care about our community.
And we know that, and that's why we want to hear you.
I want to just make one quick correction in the fact that I misstated the fact that there aren't any fuel facilities in a residential neighborhood. When we annexed Park Place, we brought one in, but it was there before. So I will...
Not in a historic neighborhood.
Not in a historic neighborhood. I will clarify and say there's not a new fueling facility in the Conservation District. So that's just a clarification. Again, you've heard a lot of testimony and a lot of rebuttal statements from consultants, and I know that you're going to get the traffic study, and none of you are traffic engineers. I don't understand what those say, and I've been in the business a long time myself. I don't understand what they say. I have a tendency to believe more of the neighbors because they're not looking at projections. They're not looking at 2025 traffic analysis. It's the same issue we had when we were looking at a site just across the road and the traffic that was going to be generated by that use. We did not have a professional traffic engineer, but we were able to be persuasive and say, we think this is too much. I want to go back to our approval standards and criteria. Maybe they didn't have to do it, but as the city and as a citizen and a taxpayer here, I expect more from my city government. And just because they don't have to do it doesn't mean that I don't expect them to do it. I want to see a level of excellence that they have been trying to provide. We brought up a lot of concerns that they hadn't addressed early on, and I had hoped we still have additional time to work with them to look at things without it being on an adversarial basis in terms of appellant, applicant, that sort of thing. I think that we've made our case. We spent a lot of hours developing new design criteria for the historic district, and we want everybody to follow that and comply with it, not to have things be exempted. And I think Dan adequately addressed why we feel strongly about those design guidelines. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of disagreements, but we came to agree about what we wanted our historic neighborhood to be. That's Oregon City's bread and butter. And they don't have large institutional, semi-industrial type uses that are going to expand beyond the capacity of our neighborhood in the middle of them. And I want to make that point again. At the time Public Works was cited there, it was adequate for the size of our city. It is no longer the case. We need to be forward-thinking about where this facility, or at least some of the activities, need to be moved out of a residential neighborhood into another area.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and City Council, it's William Gifford again. I'm sure that you are all taking the time to read every page of documentation that has been brought forth on both sides of this issue, and have painstakingly watched all the streaming videos of all the planning sessions, planning commission hearings, and all of that wishful thinking. I hope that you are paying close attention to all the details. We are not as prepared as we were at those planning commission hearings because, frankly, we did not know what the ground rules were. I think nobody really knew how the process was going to go. We did not put on a general call to the neighborhood asking for everybody that was concerned and had evidence to testify. We had not put on a general plea for interested parties to come and make a presentation because we didn't know how the process was going to flesh out. I had no idea. I'm glad that that's still going to be open. I would like to make the point that the rebuttal of our appeal I will respond to in writing because
Great.
I'm going to
That's
go
good.
back and listen to the testimony because there were a number of things that I think that were misinterpreted from our appeal. And there will be new testimony. We just have not notified the neighbors because we didn't know what the process was going to be. The main thing that I want to say is the argument of we've always done it here, we've been here a long time, we've never had an accident yet, we're safe. That doesn't cut it for me. It's demonstrably not safe, and the argument of it's been okay so far and we've been there a long time just isn't a valid argument for me.
Okay, thank you very much.
We again thank you for listening to our concerns. We know that this is not an easy process. It's not easy for us either.
Yeah, we understand.
We've really wrestled with this particular issue, and we want you to know that we don't take this lightly. We're very serious. We want to get this resolved. We want to be able to work with our city, that is us, and make things work for everybody. But we feel right now it's pretty lopsided.
And the best public works in the state.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone going to offer the final statement? You legally get the last word. And I'll close the public hearing.
I don't have anything specific except just a request that we really spell out the schedule and what's new evidence and what's argument and when the next hearing is, because I'm already confused about what that's going to be. So once we're finished, if we could just pretty please do that, that'd be great.
Okay.
And then this is a minor detail, but there's also a gas station up in the South End Market area, and not a historic neighborhood, of course. So other than that, I think I have nothing more to say, and we just need to understand the process well, so that this is complicated for us too, and we want to make sure we do as good a job as possible.
Well, let me go ahead and make a suggestion, and anybody who can weigh in and tell me what I'm missing. But I would suggest allowing new evidence for 1 week.
7 days.
So all new evidence is written material due into the city by 5 o'clock Wednesday, October 28th. Okay. And then there's 1 week for rebuttal evidence. That means evidence that responds to some type of new evidence that came in. And that's for an additional week. And that would be due by 5 o'clock on Wednesday, November 4th. And that, again, that's written evidence. At the hearing on Wednesday, November 4th, it sounded like you'd like to hear testimony again, and so you...
No, I thought we decided just
Okay.
written.
All right, if it's just...
No, that wasn't my understanding. My understanding was we'd get additional new material, just like they had material coming to the planning commission, we had material coming to us here. Get a new additional material, written material, and then any...
The written response.
Any verbal response at a later time would be directed to that written material, would be not new.
No,
We
have a week.
I guess-
120 days.
We have a week for the response.
The first question that you probably need to ask yourself is, do you want to hear people orally at the next commission meeting?
Commissioner West.
Well, I thought you were saying if we did, then we were running out of that clock
No.
again.
You would have the power to waive that yourself. I wouldn't worry too much about
okay.
that in 20 days.
Just to reiterate, so he's proposing that we have 2 opportunities for written response, 1 week for new evidence, and the second week for any party to be able to provide a
Respond.
response. And so by the time we got here, that record we would have that record. And then we have an opportunity to deliberate on all of the evidence. Do we need to hear any additional verbal testimony? I think it's been pretty complete this evening.
And if, in fact, we're going to head down that, there's one addition, it's the 777, the final applicant. So I was sort of building that. My understanding was that you may have wanted to hear testimony that evening. If you don't, if you want to limit it to the written record, then you would actually, all rebuttal evidence would be due November 4th. The applicant would have until November 11th to submit their final written argument, and then you would deliberate on November 18th, your second meeting in November.
Actually, that's probably fine. It's not a time-limited issue. Is that okay with the rest of you?
We
Sure.
will make it available in writing. Let's hold on. We're going to
still
get to it.
not quite there yet.
I don't think we have a decision
Okay,
yet.
so 1 week for new evidence, 1 week for the response, and then another 7 days
For final written argument only from the applicant.
argument from the applicant, which will essentially reference those. And then when we come to our hearing, which would be now the second week in November, if that's what you prefer, then we'll have a complete record, because the record will then have closed a week prior, and so we'll have a week for the new information.
Right, so you would then have a week with both the new evidence that came in this week, the response evidence that came in the next week, and then the final written argument by the applicant.
Is that, yeah.
And then the 18th would be deliberations.
Yes.
Right, by us. So is that a path that you could support? Commissioner West?
That sounds like a generous and fair support
This time.
for the community.
I think it's for the community, and then gives us adequate time, I think, to spend with the material, too, and that's what we're concerned about, I think. Okay, let's go with that, so make sure that you're clear.
I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt, but
Yes.
can I ask what the, then, content of the November 4th City Commission meeting will be? Will there be no oral evidence, no oral testimony taken by the council, commission? Is that
I
correct?
think that's what we're
Okay.
intending.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
comes in writing in between.
Okay.
The opportunity for us to ask questions of staff at that point.
You would have
Is that
just
right?
received it that night.
No,
No, November 4th, there would be, this would not be on the agenda November 4th.
Okay, so just
There would be.
we pushed it
We
back
all
another
have
2
time.
weeks.
Everyone
I
has
just wanted to
time.
clarify that.
Yeah, it should make everyone feel not quite so stressed on having to meet up.
So let me try to run through it one more
Please.
time.
Would you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So there will be no further oral testimony. This was it. November 4th, 5 o'clock, Wednesday, November 4th, any new evidence that anybody wants to submit can come in.
28th.
I'm sorry. Let me try that again. Wednesday, November 28th. Wednesday, October.
I have it written down.
I do too.
Give me 3 strikes. I've got 2.
All right.
Wednesday, October 28th, all new evidence by 5 o'clock must be provided to the city, and that means must be at the city. In the mail on the October 28th doesn't cut it. It's got to be at the city. Then Wednesday, November 4th is a deadline for response to that material submitted on October 28th. It's not new evidence on the 4th. It is response to the evidence that came in on the 28th. Then November 11th is the deadline for the applicant to submit final written argument. There's no new evidence in that final written argument. It is just argument as to why they have met the criteria. And then the commission will take that evidence under consideration and deliberate and make a final decision on November 18th if they can make a decision.
At which there's also no public testimony.
Again,
And
no
no public
testimony.
testimony at that point on this issue. Okay. You need to come to the microphone, please.
So we can get all these, I know you're going to be writing all these dates, so.
Yes.
Denise McGriff again. I heard a comment saying that we would have questions of staff by the commission. So are we talking about
Planning
as
staff.
Yes.
Not the applicant staff?
Planning staff.
Planning staff only.
Yes.
I'd like that to be very clear on the record, so
Yes,
we
I
don't
meant to
get
clarify that,
confused, and other people don't, who are watching tonight, don't get confused. Okay, so it's planning staff. So he's not going to go, oh, well, Nancy, then can you answer that question?
Planning, the commission has the ability to consult with their planning staff on
Right, but I mean,
matters.
if he refers to Nancy, then that's getting into the applicant thing. I
What I
see
can-
what I'm saying? It's a little dicey.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, and what I'm telling you is that the city commission will consult with planning staff.
Okay, planning staff, I'm good with planning staff.
Okay. Okay, yes, please, let's make sure we understand.
William Gifford, will there be an opportunity for the appellant to have a written copy of any new evidence submitted by the applicant?
You may ask planning staff, you have the right to inspect public records and copy them like anybody else. You might want to make arrangements with planning staff if that's your wish.
That's my wish.
Okay, I mean, you know, it certainly hasn't been an issue in the past. I would assume that you would get it, you know, but
Would we be getting that testimony, if it's due then on that Wednesday, the 28th, October 28th?
Tony, how will you handle
By when
the...
would we receive
just
a
a
copy
second
of
here.
that?
Let's find out how you'll handle the new
I think
information that comes
we
in.
have 2 options. I can, you know, what we'll do is on the 29th, we'll have it posted on the web, on our city planning page.
Okay.
If you
Thank
would-
you. That'll be a good way
And
to
we'll-
disseminate it. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you all who came. Anyone who comes out of their warm home to a city commission meeting, we really appreciate that, and we understand that because you do that, that you have concern. Because we've been going along, we'll take a 5-minute break, and some of you may wish to go home, and then we'll continue with our agenda. We have pulled one item off of the agenda. We have, we'll be doing item 7A at our next meeting. So the Oregon City garbage rate issue we'll consider next time. We are in a break. 5 minutes. Be back quickly. We are back in session. Under general business, the next item is the second reading of ordinance 9-1006 for the vacation of an easterly section of Fisher Avenue. Is there any staff report or changes on this? If I not, then may I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. For the second reading, Mr. Kabizman.
Final vernacular.
Ordinance number 09-1006, an ordinance vacating a section of Fisher Avenue of the Nob Hill subdivision plat number 239, Clackamas County, City of Oregon, City, Oregon.
Thank you. Further comment or questions? Hearing none, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. The next business item is local agency agreement number 25,796 between ODOT and Oregon City. This is for right-of-way services for Oregon 213 I-205, the Redland Road Crossing Project. For the staff report, Nancy Krushauer, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. This is a fairly straightforward right-of-way agreement with ODOT. Its value is approximately $10,000, and it's using their standard form for right-of-way agreements. The point of this agreement is for ODOT to be able to certify the process that we use to obtain right-of-way for the Jug Handle project and the Redland Road intersection improvements. So it's really, they're doing a process to certify the work that we're actually doing all the right-of-way acquisitions, but because of the federal highway requirements, ODOT needs to certify that we did everything correctly. We need to pay them for that.
Okay, may I have a motion for the intergovernmental agreement, please?
Oh, so moved.
And second.
So second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Is there comments or questions? Nancy, please poll the commission.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Yeah, and last item of business are the minutes of October 7th. Yeah, motion,
Move
please.
approval.
And second?
Wait, was it here?
Yes, everyone was. Might look before you leave. All right, second, please.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner West, second by Commissioner Smith. On the minutes, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Communications. So, Mr. City Manager, do you have anything as astounding as the announcing of your retirement last evening, which was incorrectly reported by the Oregonian as unspecified personal leave, but it really is your retirement, correct?
That is correct. I think it was actually stupid headline writers, right?
No, it was the entire article.
You know, my mother.
Anyway,
my mother-in-law heard that I was accused of being biased in that story. She read it and she's like in favor of Larry, right?
Yeah, it was biased.
She thought it was a great story.
It's been worse. I did have one person call me at one time, that's not related to this story, and was surprised when I answered the phone because they had heard I was dead.
Dead.
So this is
Yeah.
better than...
Just retirement.
Well, that's right.
Effective March 31st, and of course, the Commission will be talking about the public process and the process we'll wish to use to select our new.
And there was a request at the bottom of that letter that at some point I'd like you to discuss.
Yes, we will take that up as well. We have nothing on the consent agenda. Oh, actually, we're in communications, aren't we? And appointments, I have an appointment of Mike Cottle to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for the term beginning today to December 31st, 2010. Are there reports from commissioners at this point, from the committees you go to? Commissioner Nocita?
Not a committee report. It's actually, now that we've been through this wonderful public hearing tonight on our commission call-up, I heard it said, I don't know whether it was in the Urban Renewal Commission meeting or early on in this commission meeting, that the Planning Commission had approved the cove development. And we had set this policy that we would call up for review any property that was city-owned, and that is a city-owned property. So I want to make a move that we call up the Planning Commission decision on the cove as well.
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Nocita, seconded by Commissioner Neely. I need to understand what that means. We review it as an Urban Renewal Commission, so we're going to, we've already done that, so I'm not really sure what that does, where that gets us. Could I have a response first? Because I don't understand where that gets us.
No,
what
that's
that
not
does.
that's not a land use process. Approving a concept plan as an Urban Renewal Commission is statutorily different from having a land use hearing on a land use decision from the Planning Commission.
This is a different process, though.
It's a completely different process.
So this is, what did they just approve?
So, the Planning Commission in February approved the concept master plan for the cove development, which was 8 phases over 10 years, in phases 1 and 2 of the detailed development plan that implement phases 1 and 2 for the mass grading infrastructure on the site. They came back in, and they had some amendments because they added additional property.
Right.
And some other minor amendments. So that went through an amendment to the concept master plan and the 2 detailed development plans. So that's what was approved. The notice of decision went out last Friday. The appeal period runs on the 26th, which is next Monday. So that's where we're at right now on that application.
So would it be appropriate to wait till after the appeal date is completed? I mean, so that its record's open, or?
Right now, one person has standing to
okay.
appeal. Well, 2, ODOT and one other person.
Okay. Commissioner West?
I don't remember making any blanket policy statement that we were going to pull up everything of a city property. Why would we do that?
I don't know that we made a blanket.
Commissioner Neely?
Yeah.
I don't know that we made a blanket statement. We have a commissioner making the request. It's one that I, in fact, support, so I'm seconding it.
Okay. So how do you envision this happening?
We're just going to take a look at what the decisions were. I want to take a look at them.
Okay, so the process would be, how do we do that?
Well, I guess depending on how the commission decides if they want to call this up or not, and if they do, staff would request some direction so that we're sure we fulfill what your objectives are here in terms of the expectations for noticing, who has standing, if this is going to be on the record, off the record.
Yeah,
Are we applying land
it's
use?
different at all than what we've just done for the Public Works Master Plan. I mean, when Commissioner Neely first raised this idea early in my tenure, he raised it as, I thought it was not a written policy, but a general consensus policy that because it involves city-owned property, that this commission has an interest and the people have an interest of reviewing the land use decisions of the Planning Commission. I'm strongly in favor of that, and I don't see. I mean, in order to be consistent, I think we should do this identically to what we did with the Public Works Master Plan, to cite the same statute that we cited for the Public Works Master Plan, and as well open it up to any issue and not have any standing limitations. Just in order to be, I would think it would be hypocritical to have a different standard for each hearing we do. I think we have to be consistent on each one.
Well, except that this was an appeal, and so we had criteria. We had a record to look at. I mean, we have a record to look at.
So there is a record in the Planning Commission approval of the code that was just done. It'd be no different.
Okay, so we just review the record?
I guess the one suggestion I would have is that having just gone through the process, that we learn whatever lessons we can, and one of the things that staff had indicated in terms of providing information to you what would you like to
tell
see? A
them.
general, if in fact you decide to call it up, an idea of what your concerns are, if there are any, or if it's just we just want to take a look, give us a planning commission.
You just want the record.
Well, no,
well.
I don't agree with that, because I didn't express any concerns about the Public Works Master Plan for this hearing.
No, that's what I guess. So what I'm saying is based on what I'm hearing. I'm just going to give you the record. I'm not analyzing anything for you. I'm not providing.
That's fine.
Wait. One at a time. Commissioner Weth is first, followed by Commissioner Neely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you're not pulling it up for any reason and you're concurring, then why do we not just read the report if there's nothing special that you're looking for, number one? And number two, before I can vote for this, I just don't even know why you really want to do it. So until you tell me, give me a reason what you're looking for at this stage in the process with just minor amendments there. And continuing, I don't want to get into where we're undermining our planning commission. That's the job they're given, and there's been 4 or 5 years of testimony on it. So what are you looking for?
I'm not going to prejudge it. I'm not looking for anything specific. I think it's a policy that the city commission should look at.
Well, then why is there a need for it?
May I?
Commissioner Neely next.
Thank you. I would suggest that is a motion that we will look at it should we find something in the record that we're concerned about. And we can look at the record and then go ahead and put it for in fact, a commission agenda. But I do think this is city land. We have responsibility for the city land. And I think it's really got to have a different bar that we look at.
Okay, then I need clarity on the motion,
Let
because
me
I
ask
think you
let me
said
ask one
something
question.
different.
Let me
So
ask
just-
one question to make
Yes.
sure that
Go
you
ahead.
don't get caught. Is there a date certain that they have to make that request to call it up, and when is that?
You said Monday.
Does it have to occur within the appeal period, or they have?
Yeah, to the extent you don't call it up within the appeal period, it's a final decision and can't be challenged. Now, to the extent you disagree with what the Planning Commission did, because we have some role as property owner, there may well be some options there, but this is a different situation than today. For example, in the Public Works, you're the applicant to the extent, well, I don't want to go into that issue because it's still, but if in fact you don't call it up, it's a final decision that can be relied upon by the applicant. In that case, that would be PPS. And so if you don't call it up, you don't get a chance to review it. When is the 120-day clock? Do you know offhand?
We've got time. I
So-
don't remember off the top of my head.
So the call-up is the request, or is it the actual?
It is essentially the city commission appealing the planning commission decision. It comes up for your review. You would be making a land use decision just as you would with any other appeal. The call-up is the city commission functioning as an appellant.
Okay,
Precisely what we
Okay,
did with the hearing tonight.
No, that was appealed by the
It was appealed,
McLaughlin.
but the city commission called it up as well. There were two.
We called it.
In the
But I didn't understand that it served as that. Just a second, I need Commissioner
Sure.
Neely next.
Yeah, it was, yeah, we called it up, and was called, although we knew the appeal was coming, we called it up, and it was an independent call of the appeal. I'll look for the attorney for some guidance there, because, of course, the applicant in this case is not the city, but city's properties in Phase 1 and Phase 2 are involved in the process. It's the Urban Renewal Agency's properties.
That's my understanding, yes.
But I guess we call it up on appeal, but there's got to be some grounds for the appeal.
And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you
Yeah.
about tonight,
And
you know,
so-
given what, like I said, learn the lessons that we might have tonight, you know, what the ground, you know, some ground rules and some.
I guess, let me just add, I guess I'd like to perhaps see the record then. I would withdraw my second. I'd like to see the record and then determine whether there's a basis for us to call it up.
Okay.
Because if it's
So
effective...
just a minute. Wait.
I'm
Get
still
discussed.
thinking,
There's no-
I'm still thinking, though. I mean, it's still
Oh,
part of
okay.
my train of thought.
Okay. You haven't withdrawn your second? Because if you have, then I need to stop it.
I have withdrawn my second.
Okay. Then we need to put a
Then-
motion on the floor.
There's no motion on the floor.
I would first ask if there will be, if there's interest in a second from another commissioner.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. I think it's the appeal grounds I'm having trouble with. I mean, I'm happy to read the record, because I haven't seen it, but if there's not grounds for...
I mean, if
Yeah.
it effectively has to be an appeal to make this work, you
Right.
have to have some grounds to make the appeal. I mean, just calling it up, I don't think sufficient, but I'm looking for clarity from our attorney on that. And I think he's still trying to work that out.
I think so.
But-
Did you have comment?
But it's in your ballpark. If we call it up, it's effectively an appeal.
It's effectively an
The
appeal. That's
statute
correct.
doesn't require any specific elaboration of specific grounds for the appeal.
As far as I know, no, it doesn't, you're correct, the statute doesn't require any specific grounds for the appeal.
But I'm not positive how we run a meeting without specific grounds.
Yes, without
That's-
reason.
I don't know how to conduct a
Well,
meeting
if
like
you-
that. So
in
just a minute,
logic.
Commissioner West, please.
Well, it's kind of like with the neighborhood association, or can I not talk about that? Maybe we can't. Well,
Use a hypothetical.
okay, hypothetical. Why would we do that? Why would we be questioning someone's work for no, what's the reason you're doing it? We don't need to make work just for work's sake. I mean, why, we have a planning commission, we trust our planning commission, and unless there's a reason not to, why would we call it up?
Mr. Patterson. you had a comment.
The other thing you might want to think about, too, is, in particular in this case, since this is, you have a developer involved, they're going to have some concern about what is the issue that is being brought up. And in fairness to them, how do they prepare for anything that's coming forth, other than present what they've already presented to you to begin with. So, the other thing that we probably need to look at, and I don't know the answer to that this evening, I think it's all contingent upon appeal, but this could cobble up your development agreement, because there are some things that have to be done before the 15th, and if that decision is not final, that gets pushed back, and I don't know if that takes you past any dates to go forward, and we just have to look at that and see. So I just don't know.
What's required on the 15th? I'm sorry.
Well, you've got several things. You've got to transfer those properties, purchase that property. There's the line of credit that needs to be put in place. All that's contingent upon property changing hands and some investment being made so that they can begin some of that work. And if that's pushed back, I don't know, it probably gives them an opt-out. But I don't know that for a fact, because there may be a contingency that if it's appealed. This is a little bit different, though, because you have been involved as the Urban Hill Agency in making that decision, and now you're going to rethink it. So just kind of an interesting question, that's all.
Yeah, I'm just, again, not sure of the purpose of that.
And
Was there any more discussion on it?
Well, yeah, we got a second.
Yeah, no, we do have a second, so we have a motion on the floor unless we want to withdraw it. I'm just not sure of what
I'm
the
not sure what
purpose
kind of,
is. Commissioner West.
well, I don't know what the message is you want to send here and what the reason is. So I think it's going to appear chaotic in the development process here. And we've worked a long time. So if you don't have a real reason for it, why are we doing it?
I think stating, I mean, I wouldn't want to prejudice it like that, because if we have a hearing, we had people, hypothetically, if we have people in an open process come and state an approval criterion and why they don't think that a project meets an approval criterion, I can't state that won't happen. I mean, I don't know what the ruling of the Planning Commission was, what their findings were. And so I can't say that at this point that I don't have an issue with it. But going back to the process, I have always been, since Commissioner Neely mentioned it originally, of the mind that we have a fiduciary with city-owned property, and we should be looking at all of the Planning Commission's approvals of land use decisions on city-owned land.
And I'm certainly happy to review the record, but unless you know,
We
don't have
have
anything.
been
Yeah.
reviewing it at every step. So let's, do we have to vote on this?
Yes, we
Let
do.
me-
We have a motion on the floor.
Let me mention one other
Okay, Larry?
complicating factor here. Technically, this is not city-owned property.
Right. That's what I was thinking. It's not. So
You
it
only
really
have that
isn't the
one
same.
piece that you could actually debate. The rest of it, that's owned by the Urban Mill, which is a separate entity.
I think that's enough to make
Yeah.
me make my decision.
Yeah, I think so.
I
Okay,
think
wait.
I just disagree with the premise that publicly owned property, it's entitled of this Urban Renewal Agency, which at root is comes from the city, and the city taxpayers paid to purchase those pieces of property. I think it's a distinction without a difference.
Well, it is a legal distinction, though, that we have. So if there's no further comment, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye. Oh, no.
Too late.
That's not too late.
No, it's not too late.
Commissioner West?
No.
Commissioner Smith?
No.
Mayor Norris?
No. Motion fails 4-1.
I'm going to actually move to have the record of the planning commission sent to us, and then put on the agenda a discussion of the record to see if there's any particular issues that we want to discuss.
Why don't you just ask? I don't we vote on that, do we? Is there any
No.
disagreement?
Why?
Okay, is there any disagreement on that?
Okay.
Okay. May we have that? Okay. I have a report. As you know, at our last meeting, we had an extensive discussion about the reserves process, and we had the final meeting of the regional reserves, urban and rural reserves process. So I and the rest of the committee, we've spent 77 hours in meetings over 22 months. And that isn't, the Corps Four has spent a ton more, and they're still continuing their process. So we forwarded 3 processes in which we wanted changes. The bad news is that the Corps Four, who are the 3 county commissioners plus Metro, had already agreed on essentially all of them. And so I do not know whether my arguments were persuasive. And the 3 in which we were requesting changes were the Henry C. Road piece, the Newell Creek Canyon piece, and I think we're going to lose that one because governance was seen by all of the major environmental groups as belonging to Oregon City because they believe that we should be the stewards of this piece of property that we surround. Then the only other one that we requested, let's see, that one, was the third change. Oh, the other one that is not yet agreed on is whether the piece we call the brain, that included Forsyth Road in the northern part, should be included in the urban reserves. That is yet undecided. But I presented our case. I talked about all of the arguments that we had, and so I do not know what's going to happen with that. So that's where we are so far. The discussion around the table was at a very high level. It was very interesting, and who knows what the Corps Four will do with the rest of them. They have agreed on about 50% of the proposals. If you want to look at them, I have that here. This was actually last Wednesday, so I don't know what they've done to date. And they have almost as many properties that they still have additional discussion. So that's going to continue to work, and the final, what happens after they agree is that each city will sign an intergovernmental agreement with Metro and maybe the county. I'm not actually sure. And that's how I think the process begins. So, any questions on that? Then next, yes, go ahead.
It's not so much a question, it's a comment.
Sure.
I think a fair amount of issues were brought up in terms of the issues on Newell Creek. And I think we need some kind of fundamental agreements with Metro in terms of of how we are in fact going to deal with property that we're either going to annex in or not annex in. I mean, we don't have to annex it in.
I think it's the county, you mean? Because
Well-
we talked about an IGA with the county, and the county is very
Okay.
willing to do that.
To me, it's an issue. It's really a property rights issue in terms of people who live in a non-urbanized area. What is the implication of it coming under the jurisdiction of a municipality? Unless we come up with a very different tax structure that we need. I mean, we can think of things that we can do in terms of conservation easements and so forth, but that really doesn't deal with the buildings as the code's written, that they live in. I mean, that's not what the conservation easement would apply to. I think before the city comes to any kind of decision in terms of how it's going to take over the jurisdiction of it, it's got to really come to some understanding of what it's going to do.
We have time. We have time. Yeah, we have time to look at that, and, I mean, we'll have to see where the process sorts out. My gut is that there is pretty general agreement that it belongs with Oregon City, but we'll see, because I made the arguments. So we'll see how that turns out. And I believe, is Dan still here? Did you forward the information to the county planning staff as well? Our changes after our discussion of urban rivers? Yeah. Okay, so we've got those bases covered anyway. And the other one, Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, a couple of exciting things have happened. You will be receiving an invitation sometime, hopefully in November. It'll be November, December, or January, for a meeting of West Lynn and Oregon City and various stakeholders in the Willamette River, sponsored by Congressman Kurt Schrader and the National Park Service, who will talk to us about the implications of a national heritage area. It will essentially be sort of a step one in a public involvement process, so we can really decide whether we want to commit $10,000 to a staff person and really get that ball rolling. It's beginning to have legs. And then Congressman Schrader is, he may have introduced it, but last week when we had our meeting, had drafted language to authorize our study of National Heritage Area, but he went one step further than we even dreamed he would. He attached it to the Secretary of Interior's office so that it will actually come with funding. And so if that happens, essentially the Secretary of the Interior has to do the study, which means it has to be funded essentially through National Park Service. So it's kind of an exciting proposal, so I'll let you know how that goes. But those are the two pieces, so watch for that invitation. Likely it'll be at the convenience of the National Park Service staff, and maybe not our own, but hopefully it'll be time when we can all attend for the National Heritage Area kind of question and answer session. And I think that's all I have. I know we all have a 7 a.m. meeting. There are those of you who are planning to attend for the Main Street annual meeting tomorrow. Commissioner West, did you have anything?
Well, I was just going to ask or announce to everybody that is tomorrow morning at 7:30, and I was...
7.
I'm already using my discretionary powers.
Good, I go with you.
The meeting starts at 8. But I was going to say, so commissioners are welcome to go, and it's kind of an update of what we've done this first year on Main Street. So as I had mentioned at Urban Renewal Commission, if any of you are feeling like you don't know what's going on and that meeting is not possible tomorrow, Lloyd or anybody else would be happy to give you a general update of all our committees, including sign codes and our storefront grants and all of it. He'd be happy to, so...
Meeting starts at 8, but breakfast starts at
7. Yeah,
Well,
I want to eat.
need to eat.
Okay, if there's no... Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Smith.
One more thing.
Yes.
This is kind of a follow-up that I was going to try to send out by email, but I haven't been home today, and I'll be at conferences all night tomorrow night as well. at last night's work session, when we had the discussion about the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center site, Commissioner Seeley...
Seeley? I like that.
I've heard worse.
It's been a long day. Commissioner Nocita asked, I made comments about my concerns about hiring another consultant, et cetera, and that led to the question, well, how else do we go about this process? At the time, I didn't have any sort of an answer at all. When I walked out of this building, I had a small answer. So I wanted to at least just mention one thing about what came to my mind after I walked out of here last night. In our past discussions about the future of this building...
Site.
Yeah, thank you, site. Site as a whole, all the buildings. We had modified as a commission our verbiage from consultant to facilitator to facilities manager, and that was a discussion that we talked about. And it was actually in our notes as a facilities manager. When I remembered that last night, I was thinking that actually that might be part of an answer. So I don't know that it's a complete answer, but if we hire a facilities manager, not a consultant, and that facilities manager is responsible for managing that facility, and we, as Phil Yates stated in citizen comment, go through some sort of an RFP process, maybe the discussions community-wide continue through community gatherings, et cetera, and that continues to grow. Those lead into RFPs that come to the city in various forms, maybe through different community groups, et cetera. Those RFPs are, evaluated by the commission and the city, and this possible facilities manager. I don't know how the logistics of that would work, but that facilities manager then would be responsible for managing that facility with these partnerships. And it also might, if you have a facilities manager position of some sort anyway, that deals with one person at the visitor center on site that's alone all hours of, while they're operating, and really start evaluating what we're going to do with that building. I don't, by any means...
I hate to interrupt you. This is not on the agenda for tonight, though.
Yeah, we could...
Yeah, it's not, that was last night's discussion. Could we do that in our next,
Well, I don't know. I'm saying it now because I don't know in what other forum to say it. So it may be a future agenda. But really, it's a clarification of our notes from the past, which was we were all talking about a facilities manager.
And I mentioned that last night. I called the person 3 names, I think, whatever.
Okay, well, we were talking about a consultant last night. It's 2 different things. So.
Well, yeah, semantics probably.
So where do I go? Well,
I think
really.
we gave staff direction to bring us back a proposal. So that will be our next discussion. I think our direction to staff last night, catch me if I'm wrong, but I reiterate, I mentioned a couple times, to bring us back an RFQ or RFP, whichever it is, that covers the ranges of discussions of the needs that we saw that would direct a citizen-driven process and of a steering committee or a citizens committee that would begin to filter, vet, and together with the facilities manager, develop the vision for the place and do the implementation. So whatever that person is or firm, facilities manager, that we'll have an idea of what that needs to be, and then so that's where the discussion then will take off, I believe. That was what we all agreed to last night.
Perfect. We'll talk about it again.
And we got to realize, sometimes we get these things and we see things that maybe we find problematic and perhaps get a a bit concerned about. The point is, these are things that we are supposed to look at and
Yes.
see if this is what we want and so forth. And sometimes I think the feeling comes out that this is what the city manager thinks the final product ought to be, and I don't think it's ever the intent of this kind of thing.
Oh,
And
no.
so we need-
No.
that's
No, we-
nothing to do with
I
We
will
asked-
bring you a draft, and you
Yeah.
can work from there,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
there are a lot of loose ends on this one.
That's the next step, and then,
He's not in that
and then we'll refine it where we want it to
I'm
go
only the
after that.
messenger here. Do not shoot.
Okay, thank you. Any other reports this evening? Thank you, we are adjourned.